Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this historic 400th episode of the Keeping
Wow,
Karlsson podcast. Here for the live show to see
that's
us do this in real
crazy.
time. Yeah. How
I
you doing,
am
Brian?
good. I'm doing better than anybody who rostered Nedeljkovic today, who was trying not to lose. I put out a call on Twitter to who see if anybody wanted to share their story. This is just 10 minutes ago. I got a gif of Conan O'Brien shouting why. So he let in 6 goals on 12 shots, right? So
Didn't he get pulled and then came back in and let in more goals?
I've only seen the box score and a couple highlights, so I don't know the game story.
I'm pretty sure I saw that
Let's
he let in
see.
the last goal, even though he got pulled at some point. So not great.
Um, yeah, I'm looking. Oh yeah, Pickard had to leave the game because he got hurt. So Pickard came in for Nedeljkovic, and then Nedeljkovic came back in and gave up another goal.
Damn.
He gave up a seventh. I hadn't seen that. Oh my gosh. So we had somebody had Nedeljkovic and still won their save percentage handily thanks to Shesterkin. And I'm reading another. I started the week in ninth, needing a win, and the teams in sixth to eighth to lose. Sixth and seventh will lose. Eighth place after being behind all week is now ahead by exactly Nedeljkovic's margin. So yeah, it might have cost Dave the playoffs. That's rough. That's
Yeah, I
rough. I
guess you
mean, these things could happen any week. I mean, actually, this is we've talked about some of the biggest goalie blowups this year. I'm confident this is the biggest. There was the Halak game for Vancouver where they wanted him to play and stay in, but he couldn't stop a puck, so they took him out. And now this. Wow. Way to go, Nadal. That's how we started the season too, right? It was wasn't that an 8-7 game, huge blow up? Anyway,
yeah,
we're
sorry. I'm
all
just gonna. I was
yeah,
telling
that's
Brian.
okay.
Brian's gonna do some crowd work for a moment. I'm just gonna finish up my notes quickly.
I forgot that you weren't paying attention, and I was going solo, and I don't have the chat loaded yet. So hello to the chat room. Let's see. I'm pulling it up. Okay, thanks. Be it fancy tidbits and shams, filling it in. Georgiev had a horrible one last year that lost me. Well, Georgiev is one of the reasons that when did he have that crazy Sunday start? Was it last week? It's one of the reasons I'm not getting a buy in the tier 2 Ottawa consolation bracket of the Cupful, kkupfl.com. So that's a bummer. So yeah, fantasy tidbits. I'm with you. I am missing the playoffs tonight, although I've been missing the playoffs. I think I was eliminated 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And so actually there's another league I'm in where I co-manage a team with John Newholt, who is in tier 1 and former fast track champion and friend of the pod. And we are out of the playoffs. We traded away our whole team and then continued making a run towards the playoff that we weren't expecting. We've had 3 keepers injured now. We have Couturier injured all year, Stone essentially injured all year, and then Ekblad injured, and we were still sort of in the running. This week, our team just could not pull out anything, which is fine. They shouldn't have, because we traded away all our best players for picks 3 weeks ago. So we weren't expecting to be in this position. So now I think our roster might get locked tomorrow because we'll be officially out of things. So we're trying to decide. We've added a couple players who we think it's a keep 8. A couple players who we think might have some keeper value next year out of free agency. So we've added Boone Jenner and Carey Price, who are both in free agency because they're on IR, and this league does not have enough IR spots. And we're picking 2 more, and I'm not gonna share who they are
Brian,
because
I wanted to ask you a question about that.
I will once it's done.
I was chatting with Ben. You guys were in a decent spot to make the playoffs. Why did you decide to just blow up your team and give up on the season when you
I
still
didn't.
were in
We didn't think
contention?
we didn't think we were in a decent spot to make the playoffs. We had lost 4 in a row, And again, we were burning like roster spots because we had 2 keepers that we couldn't drop in our only 2 IR spots available. And then it was the week, and then we beat first place. And we were like, oh, okay, like maybe there's still a chance, but we still had to make a call. And we lost 4 in a row to pretty much knock us out of contention. And the way we saw things going, we weren't going to get back in it. Then we shockingly won 3 of 4, and this was after the sell-off had already begun. So,
Yeah, so do you have any like regrets that maybe if you would have just kept all your players, you might be, going for the win right now, or are you happy with what
I
you
don't
did?
think so. I mean, like, I don't think we were. I think we had we had an outside chance, but I really think, like, looking at the teams that are in the playoffs, I think we're the only ones who have 2 keepers in 2 IR spots, and like we've coped pretty well.
No, I'm with you.
You have 2 keepers in
Well,
IR spots.
Pacioretty. Oh, and Couture maybe isn't a keeper. Okay, fine.
Right.
Pacioretty,
And
Couture,
Pacioretty is like on again, off again. Like we know there's no getting Couturier back, and there's no getting Stone back. Like that's
Right.
it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it says a lot about also how you are as a fan versus me. Like I'm always like happy when my team, gives away picks at the deadline for a rental, even if like the team's chances aren't that great. And you're always like on the pod, I feel like saying like if the team is like out of the playoffs, it's probably not worth it. You might as well just like think more to the future. I'm just like, I have no patience, right? I always want to win now. I never want to think to the future unless it's like, I guess, obvious. But I guess you're a more patient person than me. So I guess you guys just sort of looked at the landscape, didn't like how it looked, and were like, retool.
It wasn't like we were excited to blow it up, and like it was a decision. Like we had to make a call, and maybe in hindsight it was the wrong one. But I do think that we are one, and we really also felt like
next year
we had to get into. We wanted to like manage like be first in on the trade market. Right. Before everyone's picks. Yeah, our draft, we're going to be done by like the 3rd round next year, which I don't know if is good or bad, because we were actually talking, like, I'm like, I like those 9th, 10th round picks that sometimes turn out like, in those first, the first round is actually the 9th round because it's a keep 8. And sometimes there are players who, you can't ignore. And it's like, yeah, well, you'd be dumb to like not take what feels like a sure thing over a flyer. But those late round flyers can end up outproducing.
Maybe you could make some more trades. Like apparently Ben's leaving trades open, so you can trade down in exchange for like a keeper upgrade or something.
Exactly. So we have some trade chips for that purpose, and also like we can also trade down or like whatever. There's a lot we could still do, but it is funny that I saw the fact that we had all these like high end picks as like almost a bit of a like it takes some of the fun out a little, because I like making those late round picks, but and also the pressure's on. Like if we don't nail all the first, second, third round picks we've accumulated, it'll be kind of embarrassing.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I have some certain motivations now in this league after seeing all these crazy people and trades, like, and everyone, like, all the people who blew up their teams and all this. Like John and I just have picks 1 through whatever. Like we just have all the picks from each round. We ended up at one point we traded a 4th for a 10th, and then in another trade we got a 10th for a 4th and just like evened it back out. So like we're gonna go for the win this year. We probably won't win. Like our team isn't that amazing, but we're in the playoffs. And then my big goal next year is to do better than a team like yours that traded up for all the picks. Like that's my motivation. Is like, because I always feel like so much pressure and frustration, but it's like obviously you have to do what you have to do. But it's like when I see other people doing all these trades, either giving away all their picks or gaining all these picks, I always feel like I guess I have to get in on it, or I'm either gonna like, because like you could say that I'm sort of like in no man's land. Like I made the worst decision, right? Because I didn't trade away all of my picks to go for it, but at the same time I didn't like accumulate any picks by acknowledging that I wasn't gonna win. So probably now I'm just going to lose and not have great picks.
Yeah.
So
well,
I'd love to I was somehow overcome that.
It's funny. You and Ben were talking about our team, and we were talking about you, seeing that you were contending and you like were standing pat, because we were also trying to like potentially make some trades with you.
Yeah, but you wanted to give me all your players like Sam Bennett, who you had done calculations about why he's going to be bad, and he's not actually better than anyone on my team. Like you didn't offer me. I tried to make a trade with you for Dubois, and you were like, no. It was like any player that Like,
Well, at least
obviously,
he
you'll
Dubois
trade
is
me
a
players that
keeper.
suck. Like, I wanted to only accumulate players that are better than the players on my team. Otherwise, why am I giving up a pick for them?
We did discuss Dubois. I mean, you negotiated with John, not with me, so I don't know how everything went. But of course, like I had
John
to
was just
say,
like, "Don't you want Sam Bennett?" And I was like, "Tell me a player on my team who you
yeah,
think Sam Bennett is better than."
yeah. Unfortunately, we wrecked Sam Bennett's value. Although we had been trying to trade him even while he was still hot, and there were no takers.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, it'll be
yeah.
fun.
So,
It'll be
but
fun to
we
see
were
what
talking about
happens.
you and saying like, is this like your little rebellion? Like you're not gonna trade, you're not gonna upgrade any of your players, and you're not gonna sell any of your draft picks, and you're just gonna try and win. And whether that is a recipe for success or to just like always have a good season, but then not put your team over the top.
Yeah. I guess for me, I always want to be in contention every year. I don't want to give up next year, and I don't want to give up this year. I feel
Well,
like
I
once I'm in
think
the
you could
playoffs, I
make
could do anything.
well, but perhaps you gave up this year by not upgrading for
Well,
next year.
I'm in the
Like you might
playoffs.
be able to, for sure, and anything can happen once you're in the playoffs. But I
Yeah.
think it might be easier to compensate for lost draft picks than it is for lost
Oh, yeah, probably.
lost upgrades this year.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't like it. To be honest, I don't
No,
really
I
like
know you don't.
Yeah. I don't really like leagues like this.
Well, this is what I said. It's like it was your personal rebellion. You were just
Yeah.
like, this is not how I play. I'm gonna stick to my principles. I don't like what everyone's doing. I don't want to play that game. And you
Yeah.
didn't.
And so we'll
I
see what
get
happens.
it.
Like, to me, it'll be like the ultimate achievement now if I win, right? It'll feel even more special. Like, it's almost like for me a little cheap to win by giving away all my picks to load up on superstars. Imagine how cool it'll be to win with all my picks still. But obviously, that's going to be very difficult to do. But we'll see. I guess we should do the show then. Hopefully, people enjoyed this chat. Brian, I see you're reading some stuff, so I'll just let you.
Oh, how did you know?
Because your face was like not paying attention to me. I could tell when I'm talking to someone, they're not paying attention to what I'm saying. I get that feeling a lot on the show. I've come to learn that.
Sorry. Oh, I'm just a terrible person.
Well, I mean, that's taking it a little far. But let me know when you're ready to engage with me, and then we'll start the show, and it'll be great.
I'm ready to. Did you say something that warranted a response? Did I blow?
No, it was great.
I mean, clearly I did something wrong.
You didn't do anything wrong. I was just saying I'm going to wait for you to be ready, and then I'll start the show.
Okay. I appreciate that. Before we start, our Pete has some injuries and limited IR spots. Zoom face, Shem says. That's funny. Yeah, I can tell, and I don't like it when I'm talking to people who I know aren't listening because I'm the king of not listening. I know what it looks like.
Who's Max Jones?
Is Max Jones worth keeping? Okay, let's guess.
24 years old.
This is a regular category league with NHL salaries. I'm guessing this is like a dynasty. Have you already looked him up, Elon? Because I was going to say, let's try and guess what team he plays for. I want to guess if you already know.
Yeah, I already know.
Is it Anaheim?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
I mean, obviously, I don't know like the quality of players you're choosing between, but I am in a dynasty league and I'm listening to like podcasts about prospects. And I very rarely, if ever, have heard people talk about how Max Jones is anything. I see he's already played 137 career games and has 28 points. Our Pete, man, I don't know, man. I don't see why he'd be worth keeping, but maybe I'm missing something in your situation. So hopefully that helps.
Max Jones.
He seems like a total nobody.
First rounder out of the OHL.
2 shots per game. Some hits.
He was never a big OHL scorer either, which is always kind of a red flag.
Like 24.
If you were not a point per game plus player in every year of your OHL career, then I'm not really counting on you to have much NHL impact. Yeah. We'll actually talk about a player like that tonight.
Yeah. Oh, this is going to be a long show. I can't believe we haven't started.
Oh my God. We should actually start.
All right, let's do it.
All right. It's like the Radio Lavin. Yep. Okay.
All right.
Yep. Okay.
Here we go.
All right.
What am I going to say here? Yeah! Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who just barely have more players to talk about than the Pittsburgh Penguins scored goals today. I am your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me, as always, I love seeing that smile come across Brian's face. With me, as always, our very good friend, the fantasy hockey robot, the poobah of prognostication, it's Brian Comm!
Hello, Elon. Hello, everyone. Yeah, how about the Pens hanging 11 on Detroit? 7 of those coming against Alex Nedeljkovic on just 15 shots. The good news for Nedeljkovic managers is he had only stopped 6 of 12, so had a 500 save percentage on 12 shots, which I feel like might be an NHL record for number of shots faced with a 500 save percentage. He was able to come back into the game after being pulled for Calvin Pickard, who then got injured, and Nedeljkovic went back in and then stopped 2 of 3, which up to save percentage by, just about that much, and might have saved your seasons in the process. I don't know. It's more likely he wrecked you. So I hope nobody got bit too hard or that you benefited from someone else playing Nedeljkovic today. I know that today marks the end of the Cupful regular season, Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, kkupfl.com. We have the playoffs coming up. We're super excited. I imagine all of your playoffs are coming up too. And have we got the goods on the show today for you to make your team super competitive through the playoffs all the way to win your championships?
Yeah, I'm sure anyone who is looking at this episode in their podcast feed is seeing like a 2+ hour show. That's just my guess. We'll see how this goes. But yeah, our plan for today is we're looking over the next 3 weeks of the NHL season, because like for the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League and probably a lot of other leagues, these next 3 weeks are the playoffs. You got the quarters, the semis, the finals. And so we're looking at every single team, ranking them from least number of games played over these next 3 weeks to most games. And then we're going to, dive into each team and find a little nugget that can hopefully help you. Obviously, for the teams with a few games, we're going to be like, maybe is it time to drop some of the higher end players because they don't play that much. For teams with a lot of games, we'll try to give you some good players that might be under the radar that you might want to grab, like, a 12 game in 3 weeks player that's not that great might still be better than a 8 game in 3 weeks player. So that's going to be our plan for today. We're just going to go through every single team in the league and we'll see how long it takes us. Before we get into it, of course, Keeping Karlsson very proudly presented by DobberHockey.com, the #1 fantasy hockey website in the world. If you're doing well in fantasy, it's probably because you're checking out Dobber Hockey every day. They've got amazing articles by really smart people, and the tools at Frozen Tools just cannot be beat. So yeah, that's what I use to prep the show. It's amazing. DobberHockey.com. But okay, Brian, I guess with that, let's just get started. Like I said, we're going to go with the fewest number of games played all the way to the most games played over these next 3 weeks. And I'm going to start in Vancouver. Not a great schedule coming up, okay? They play 3 times, then 3 times, then 2 times if you make it to the finals. So at least, they're fine over these next couple of weeks. And then maybe it'll be in the finals where you definitely have to decide if you're going to drop someone. But maybe you just want to get ahead of it right now. At least next week, the Canucks play Monday, Wednesday. So even if we're talking about a player like Brock Besser, who we're going to get to, who maybe you might not decide to keep, at least keep him Monday, Wednesday, right? And then maybe you drop because they don't play again until a busy Saturday at the end of the week. But you've got some other guys like Tanner Pearsons, Connor Garlands. These are the types of players that I would be easily telling people that they can probably drop with a bad schedule. But, Monday, Wednesday, you're playing with the red hot JT Miller. Keep him for those 2 days. But Brian, I want to ask you about Brock Besser. Okay, we had a patron, Gus, who asked what to do with the guy. He only has 4 points in his last 9 games. He's getting great deployment, right? He's playing with EP40 and Bo Horvat, and he's on the top power play. But for some reason, Besser is just not producing. And he's a really hard player to keep right now with this weak schedule coming up. Again, you have I just added Tanner Jeannot in the Cupful, though I'm skipping next week. We'll get to Nashville. They only play twice. But if I could have 8 games from Jeannot in the semis and the finals versus 5 games from Besser, I'd probably take Besser over Jeannot if it was even. But this is going to be a tough decision for people to decide. Do you hold a cold Brock Besser with a weak schedule? If you look at the whole season, he's only on a 51-point pace if he played a full 82 games. So it's not only is he a keeper for these next couple of weeks, I also kind of want to know, is he even a keeper for next season? We're in a keep 8 league. I assume Besser is going to be a keeper for someone, but I don't even know if he would crack my top 8 at this point, especially if I didn't have a good reason to expect him to do better than what he's done so far this year.
I can't blame you for being down on Brock Besser. I had a trade offer in the Cupful on the table for Brock Besser and Seth Jones. I was sending Darnell Nurse and one of my hot LA Kings at the time, like Kempe or Moore, maybe a slightly better player. And I was a little stubborn about it. It seemed like a no-brainer. Like I should absolutely be taking that deal. Brock Besser coming my way with Seth Jones. So I'm basically downgrading Darnell Nurse to Seth Jones, which isn't a huge downgrade, except there were scheduled implications. But still, for Brock Besser to make up the difference, it seemed obvious. And I keep thinking I dodged a bullet. I mean, I missed the playoffs, so it doesn't matter either way. But at least I don't have to feel awful about never ending up taking that deal. And I'm trying to look and figure out what's going on with Brock Besser this year. My first thought was to see if there's been any difference between playing under Travis Green versus new coach Bruce Boudreau. And if anything, things have been better for Besser under Boudreau, which I'm not sure what you would have guessed. I didn't really have a guess, actually. I just thought, well, maybe nothing's changed. And not much has actually changed, but Besser has been doing a little better under Bruce Boudreau. He has another couple shifts a night at 5-on-5. Better on-ice performance from his line. Things are clicking a little better with him and his line mates. I mean, with Travis Green, things weren't even that bad for Besser, though the percentages were god-awful. Brock Besser was shooting below 3%. His line mates were shooting below 3%. That's just bad luck. I'm not attributing that to coaching, but there's been definite on-ice improvement for Besser and his line beyond just in shooting percentage. Actually, individually, Brock Besser is putting up his best shot rates since his rookie season, but those have unfortunately been paired with the worst full season shooting percentage of Besser's career. And things looked good after that coaching change too. Like maybe things would turn around with his bad shooting percentage. Besser scored 5 goals in 6 games when Gadreau came to town, and we all wanted to believe Besser was back. Since then, Brock Besser has 10 goals in 33 games, which isn't awful. It's a 25 goal pace, but just 3 even strength goals over his last 33 games. Besser is leaning hard on that power play production, which I'm going to touch on again in just a second. But if we're looking at Besser, like the big picture here, he's been a 65, 75 point guy his whole career, which counts 4 years before this one, including his rookie season. I really just think there's a couple things happening here. First, his 5-on-5 shooting percentage is 6% this season. That's taken away some of his goal scoring at 5-on-5. And his 5-on-5 on-ice shooting percentage is also around 6%, also a career low. And that's taken away assists that we would have otherwise expected to see. He has a 25 goal pace on the season, which isn't that bad compared to his career numbers, which show a 32 goal pace over 82 games. But like I mentioned, he's only had those 25 goals because of that crazy, monstrous power play production. He's been more dangerous than ever with the man advantage. Besser's already tied his career high 10 power play goals that he set as a rookie in about as many games, actually. And I think he can keep up this power play production. So for next year, the question is the 5-on-5 production going to come back? I still really like Brock Besser to return to the 65, 75 point range, hopefully the high end of that. And I think it's still there for this year. I think Besser has just had a case of whatever Pettersson has had too. You know, things just aren't working out. And sometimes that's the answer. You could hold your breath and hope things regress. If you're looking for just the rest of the season, you could hold your breath and hope things come back to normal for Besser, because all the numbers seem there to support expectations for a good season from him. But honestly, I would have an itchy trigger finger if I were in a do or die scenario and Brock Besser had this really bad playoff schedule coming up. So I don't blame anybody who's ready to cut ties and be impatient with Brock Besser. And I am looking more to next year for his full recovery to getting back to being a 70-ish point player who can put up 30, 35 goals in a season. I think there's still upside for more, actually. But for the rest of the year, he's a dicey guy to roster, especially if you're losing games played in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. It's kind of crazy when I say that he's playing with Pettersson and Horvat and on the top power play. You'd think like, okay, so he's getting the top possible deployment. But like, no, like Pettersson and Horvat are both pacing for under 60 points this year. It's playing with JT Miller. That's where you want to be. He's pacing for over 100 points. Things have really changed over in Vancouver. And I guess that's another thing. It's like Besser is not playing with the primo players. And like, how many players can you have like getting 65 plus points, right? Like you would expect Miller and Pettersson and maybe Horvat. And then so what, Brock Besser is like the 4th best best forward. I don't know. He hasn't been so much better than Connor Garland even. So yeah, I guess we'll see if next year he could bounce back a little bit. But I agree with you, Brian. It's a tough hold this year, but also don't drop him for nothing. And again, at least keep him for the Monday, Wednesday. Get a couple more games of data, 2 games in 3 days. Can't argue with that. Okay, so one team down, 31 to go. Let's go to Vegas next, who also plays only 8 times over these next 3 weeks. 3 times next week, then 2 times, then 3 times in the finals. So yeah, that semis is going to be really hard to hold some of these guys. Though one player that probably isn't worth holding, but definitely is worth discussing, is Mr. Boomerang himself. That's his official new emoji for the Vegas Golden Knights, Evgeny Dodonov, who had goals in 4 straight now. There was 2 games before he got traded. Then he didn't play a couple games, and then that whole debacle happened. He ended up, the trade got voided. He's still with Vegas, and now he's scored in 2 games since. He played with Eichel and Stevenson yesterday, and also played on the top power play. Next week, Wednesday plays Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. So while it's only 3 games, they are on off days. So you're going to get all of his games. I would say if you have him now, maybe you're dropping him and then trying to get him back on Wednesday. But if he's a free agent, I actually kind of think he's a good ad potentially come Wednesday just because of this deployment. And this is hard for me to say because Dodonov is always someone that's let us down all season long. But if you're playing on the top line and top power play with Eichel, I mean, I don't know. I like this situation, even though I know Dodonov is a continuous disappointment to us.
A continuous disappointment to us is the perfect way to phrase Dodonov this year and last year. It's funny. He's found new ways to disappoint us, right? Since leaving Florida. And honestly, it might have been a little disappointing that he didn't make it to Anaheim. Poor guy. Can you imagine being essentially fired and then forced to be taken back by your employer? And how hard that must be. But he is back with a vengeance. Dadonov scoring goals lately and now has 5 goals on his last 12 shots. He's more of a stream than a hold. I'd rather take it 1 game at a time with Dodonov. He has no less chance of performing any given night than most top streamers in a league where, say, you have about 250 players rostered. So you have 2 choices with Dodonov. You could work the roster spot that you would hold him in and try and get an extra 2 or 3 games out of it rather than just the 3 he's going to offer you this next week. But if you're not going to get more than 3 games out of the spot, assuming there's no for sure better options out there for you, I think holding Dodonov as a line 1, power play 1 guy, that's a place he could produce from. He did it in Florida. I imagine he can still play that role now to some extent. His current scoring is not sustainable, right? 5 goals on 12 shots. And again, I would rather stream him than hold him. But if you're comparing him to a bunch of other 3-game streamers who aren't top line, top power play, I would just be okay with Dodonov and hope it goes well.
Yeah, I think don't grab him. Take maybe a Carolina player who plays Monday, Tuesday next week. I don't know. Get your Martin Necas. I don't know how deep your league is, right? And then swap him for Dodonov and for Wet. You're getting 5 games then. So maybe that's a way you can play it. By the way, in Vegas, welcome back Alec Martinez out of nowhere. He's been practicing forever, so I didn't even pay attention. Shams and I are always retweeting things for the Game Day News NHL account. And, at one point we were, retweeting when it was a Vegas beat writer saying Alec Martinez is at practice. But then that got boring because he was just always there, but didn't mean anything. Randomly yesterday it was oh yeah, he's actually gonna play. It's what? I can't believe it. And it looks like he got eased in. He only played 13 minutes and 48 seconds, but in that time 2 blocks, 3 hits. So, the peripherals were there, only 1 shot, no points. But, I'd imagine that ice time is going to go up. And so maybe those peripherals can get even higher. Maybe he starts getting more involved with the offense. So he's definitely someone interesting to me. And also we got to mention the goalies, right? Robin Lehner apparently could be back soon is what I've read. But until then, Logan Thompson has taken over. Brossoit got injured. But I feel even if Brossoit wasn't injured, Logan Thompson was clearly outplaying him. He's played 8 straight games now, has done pretty darn well overall. And Logan Thompson is only rostered in 10% of leagues on Yahoo. So I'd say if he's not taken in your league, and if come Wednesday he gets the start and there's no news of Lehner imminently coming back, how can you not want this guy, especially since they're playing Seattle on Wednesday? It's going to be a good, probably a win. So I'm into Logan Thompson. I'm surprised he's still only 10% rostered considering he's played these last 8 games and has done well.
Me too. I would have assumed he would be more sought after. I mean, of course, you have to take percent rostered with a grain of salt at this point in the season because a lot of leagues are inactive and a lot of teams are checked out. But Logan Thompson as a starting goalie on a team that isn't bad. Vegas is not as great as they have been, but they're also not bad. But they're also not bad. I'll go ahead and take their starter, however unproven. I agree, Elon, that regardless of whether Brassard was injured or not, we were trending towards Thompson anyway. He's had a couple duds, but is mostly decent. 9-14 on the season, 55% quality starts. And that's somebody who I would be interested in come Wednesday, assuming he's going to keep starting every game. And I don't see why he wouldn't until Lehner comes back. I think that's a solid ad.
Yeah, and you might see these news items like, oh, Leonard is potentially going to come back next week. We also saw that about Max Pacioretty, and then he was a game time decision, and the next thing you know, oh, now it's aggravated and he's going to be gone now for a long time. And I think Leonard's the type of goalie who's had so much injury trouble that I'm not wishing anything bad, obviously, but I wouldn't be shocked if they were like, setback, we're shutting Leonard down. It definitely could happen. So I would grab Thompson for now until you hear otherwise. Okay, let's go to Washington now, another 8-game team over these next 3 weeks and only 2 times next week. So I'm definitely not going to be recommending to add this guy, but I just gotta say it's cool to see Marcus Johansson back with the Caps after he got dealt back to his first team at the deadline from Seattle. It's been quite a ride for Marjo, right? He was a good player in fantasy. He was like a producing player that we thought of as like someone that I'd be interested in if he went into free agency in my leagues. Back when he was on Washington, he had 58 points with the Caps in 2016-17. Then he got traded to New Jersey and Boston, Buffalo, Minnesota, Seattle. And now he's kind of like a joke, right? No one, I see him in free agency in my dynasty league where everyone is rostered, and it's I don't want this guy. Now that he's back on Washington, I'm not saying I'm expecting him to go back to what he was when he was on the Caps, but it's cool to see. And hey, he was playing on the top line with Kuznetsov and Ovi in the last game. That said, like I said, Washington only plays 2 games next week, and the lines can change, but I'm curious to know, do you think there's any chance that he has it in him to reclaim whatever magic he had back in his glory days playing with the same guy on the other wing in Novi?
Keep in mind that Marcus Johansson's glory days were 55 points, give or take. It's not chopped liver, but the give or take actually could go as low as 45 points. And Johansson was also largely dependent on top power play production. 1 year, he had 20 power play points and only 44 points total on the season. So nothing at 5-on-5. And that year, he spent the majority of his 5-on-5 time with Backstrom and Ovechkin. So Marcus Johansson has never been, easy money. He's always been someone who would produce on the top power play, but rarely at 5-on-5 with any kind of regularity, regardless of his line mates, whether he was with Backstrom or whether he was whether he was with Backstrom and Ovechkin or on the second line. So I'm really, I got to say, I'm not that interested in Johansson. I know you're reaching here, but I'm not that interested unless he's on the top power play, which I don't think he will be. So I'm going to pass on him for now, but I think he is worth watch listing. This 2-game week for Washington is definitely no good, and there aren't any great weeks ahead. But if you're looking for a single game stream, depending on how deep your league is, if he's playing up on that line with Ovechkin, then yeah, he's worth considering just for that exposure, similar to Dadonov, but I would prefer Dadonov.
Yeah, Brian, to be clear, I need to come up with one player to discuss that I find at least somewhat interesting on each team. He's not even on my watch list anywhere. I hope you're aware. So I don't want you to think that I was trying to push you to agree with me that we should be interested in Marcus Johansson. I'm not. He'll have to do something before I'm interested.
Okay, we can keep the podcast together. We don't have to disband after me taking your take too seriously.
Okay, let's go now to teams that play 9 times over the next 3 weeks. So much better than 8. At least you're averaging the typical 3 games per week. And let's start in Chicago, who actually starts pretty good. They're going to play 4 times next week. So you're going to want to get your Hawks then. And there's a couple interesting ones I'm going to bring up. Then 2 times the week after, which is a bummer for myself and my keeper league, where I am going to be riding on Patrick Kane. And I'm going to hope that he can do a lot in those 2 games if I'm lucky enough to make it to the semis. And then 3 games in the last week. So 4-2-3 for Chicago over these next 3 weeks. And there's a couple guys that are available in most leagues that are starting to do stuff, starting with Jonathan Taves. How about that huge game for Taves versus Vegas on Saturday? He scored a goal, had an assist, 5 shots. Don't look now. Taves has 8 points in his last 9 games. That's the kind of thing that used to be a standard thing after 9 games for Jonathan Taves. And now it seems like a huge surprise after this big disappointing season, but who knows, maybe he's finally reclaimed. You're going to tell us, Brian, if this is sustainable or fleeting, if he's actually gotten back. And there's no way that I'm going to say that I think he's better now than a Dylan Strome. Dylan Strome has been the amazing ad for the second half of the season for anyone who was lucky enough to get him. He's crushing it with Patrick Kane. But if you have Jonathan Taves out there, and let's say another Hawk in Taylor Radish, who's been getting top power play time actually over Taves, Taves and has 4 points in 5 games with Chicago. I'm curious to know who you would take if you want a Chicago player for their 4 games next week between Jonathan Taves and the newly surgent. We've got the resurgent Taves and the new surgent Radish. Who do you like?
First time surger. Yeah, Taylor Radish. Well, Jonathan Taves had 5 shots on Saturday. That was the second highest total of the season. The guy's only even reached 4 shots 3 times this season. So that was a rarity for Jonathan Taves to take that many shots on goal. It's nice to see. I don't know that it's going to last. One of the reasons is that Jonathan Taves is playing markedly less than past seasons. He's playing 17 and a half minutes on average this year compared to 21 minutes a night in recent years. So I don't think Taves is back to himself since missing all of last year with post-COVID or elongated COVID. I'm not sure what the actual term would be. So I'm worried that Taves is still not back there now, but at least he has re-entered the streaming conversation, but he's still on the second line, second power play. So beware of that. Meanwhile, you have Taylor Radish, fourth liner to top sixer in minutes with his trade from Tampa to Chicago. And he's using those extra minutes now that he's in the top six to average a few shots per night, which he just didn't have the opportunity to do before. You pair that with 4 hits a night and top power play time, where Radish has put up 2 power play points in his last 4. And yeah, I'm interested. I think I'd actually prefer Radish as someone I have more confidence in to fill some categories over Taves. In a points-only league, I think it's maybe closer to a push between Radish and Taves. But in leagues with periffs, where you're gonna get value for Radish's hits and shots, I'll take Radish.
Yeah, plus for me, the tiebreaker is always top power play. I actually had the choice for in the league that I'm in with you, Brian, our keeper league. John and I decided, he's my co-manager, we decided to go and stream in a Chicago player. And we were deciding between Taves and Radish, and we went with Radish because for me, I just like the top power play. You know me, I'm a simple guy. I like my shots, I like my top power play. And if I could get players who do both, that's good. And yeah, Taves' shots, like 5 shots in the last game, were very appealing. But like you said, that doesn't happen too often. I'll need to see him do that a few more times before I can start to buy in. But it's nice to see. I'm also just happy, like, because Jonathan Taves has obviously had this legendary career, and it would be a shame if it ended in such a like disappointing way. Let's go now to Colorado, another 9-game team, and just a typical. You got your 3-3-3, so you're not gonna hate having any of these Colorado players, but you're also not gonna love it. You might love it because of all the points they'll give you, because there's a lot of players who are known to do that. Hopefully, by the way, everyone listened when we said a couple weeks ago to grab Nichushkin after the Landeskog injury. I think we said pause the pod. We were like, obviously you get him. He's been on the top line. He's been on the top power play. Just insane, right? 6 points his last 5 games. I'm not even surprised. 4 of those points on the power play. Colorado's playing today. They're currently beating Minnesota 2-1. Nichushkin, no points, but I wouldn't be surprised if one comes by the end of the game. So if he's still available, definitely go get him. I don't care about the 3 games over these next 3 weeks. But I want to do a cold streak with you here, Brian, especially for a team that isn't playing that much. What happened to Devon Taves? All of a sudden, his insane career year has like crashed to earth, crashed to a complete halt. He had 45 points in his first 47 games this year, almost point per game for Devon Taves. And now he has only 1 assist in his last 7 games going into today. And I do see he has an assist today. So just by writing this down last night, hopefully I reversed the jinx on Devon Taves. But yeah, have you noticed anything significant that's changed for him over these last 7 games going into today? Or is this just like a cold spell and he remains like just as good as he was before? Just sometimes it happens that you don't get the bounces for whatever reason.
I think, okay, well, just as good as he was before is like a near point per game player, and I don't think Devon Taves is that good. I think 2 things have happened over the last little while that have led Devon Taves to sort of come back to earth. And the first is that his power play production has slowed. Devon Taves was pacing for 18 power play points through about half of the season. From the second unit, so 18 power, he had 9 points in half the season, times 2 for the other half, 18 power play points. From the second unit, I'd expect a 10 to 12 power play point pace. So that's one reason why I think Devon Taves has come back to earth, is because that those extra gravy points on the power play have slowed. And the other reason why Devon Taves was due to come back down to earth is that he scored 12 times on 111 shots. That's an 11% shooting percentage for a defenseman, basically unheard of. Devon Taves was pacing for 24 goals, just 1 less than Brock Besser. And that wasn't going to happen. You regressed both the power play numbers and the shooting percentage numbers. And Devin Taves is back in the 50-55 point range, which is where I expect him to be from here on out. Still fantastic numbers, by the way, not taking anything away from Devin Taves being a 50-55 point player. That's awesome. And he's worth holding through a cold streak, hoping that those points come back. It's nice that he's already corrected some of this, because I was going to throw one curiosity out there. Just one theory, if he didn't bounce back, is that he's playing heavy minutes lately. He's played 27 minutes in 4 straight games going into today's game, which I haven't checked the minutes counts on. But he's averaged about 25 minutes a night on this season. Some heavy games, very few light games. Usually he's between 23 and 25 minutes a night. So playing an extra 2 to 4 minutes a night, maybe that load was starting to wear on what he could do to create offense. This is one possible explanation, when I think maybe the most likely one is just that Devin Taves was having your run-of-the-mill cold streak. But if you want a slightly spicier take than that, then there it is.
Right. Well, usually we want the players playing more minutes, but I guess, yeah, you can get run into the ground eventually. We are human beings after all, or at least you and I are. I don't know if Devon Taves is, but it seems like he might be. But yeah, by the way, when I said like, oh, is he going to go back to what he was doing, like what he was like before, I meant more just like in terms of the probability of getting a point in a given game. Like, should we now like downgrade our expectations? Because like I wasn't expecting him to be point per game even when he was point per game. You know, going into every game, maybe I would have in my head been like, I think there's like a 3/5 chance that he'll get a point or whatever, you know, whatever that math worked out to be. And I haven't changed my mind, basically. But yeah, he was obviously overperforming for a little bit, but I think there's a really good chance that he's still a, 50 to 60 point defenseman for the rest of the way. So yeah, he's been just obviously this like great player. And maybe if you got lucky and someone dropped him because they were too upset with his cold streak, it sounds like Brian is saying to jump back on. And today is already an indication, because not only does he have an assist on the Kadri goal, he also has 5 shots so far, and we're only like halfway through the game. So that's pretty amazing. Let's go to the final 9-game team over the next 3 weeks, and that's the New Jersey Devils. Brian, I remember a few shows ago we were talking about Jack Hughes. I was drooling over him as per usual. You said something about like, and a bunch of people agreed with you about like Jason Robertson being someone you would draft ahead of him. I don't know, this one, like, I feel just as steadfast about, I think that Jack Hughes is like an amazing superstar that I just keep expecting that him to go higher and higher in drafts next year. I wonder if he's a first rounder now. Like, his 1 goal, 1 assist versus Washington yesterday brought him to 25 points in his last 18 games. Now I'm seeing that New Jersey's in the middle of a game right now against Montreal. He's scored twice in this game so far. Just every game, Jack Hughes gets multiple points, often goals. So if you're in a league like the Cup where you get more points for goals, this guy is just insane. So I don't have a question for you, but I'm just like throwing out there that if people are curious if I'm still as high on Jack Hughes, I'm even higher, okay? Then, of course, you've got Bratt and Heishier, who are super hot. Like, they're clearly top contenders for fantasy free agent pickups of the year for anyone who added them. They were available in a lot of leagues at one point, obviously not for a long time. And even here, some good news for Dougie Hamilton managers. He's been playing on the top power play in the last 3 games. I noticed that New Jersey has switched to a 3 forwards, 2 defensemen. They didn't bump Severson, but they just bumped someone else to get Hamilton up there. It's basically been Bratt, Heishier, and Hughes with Hamilton and Severson. The bad news, though, is that Hamilton now stopped shooting. Like, I don't know, this guy is so frustrating, right? Even getting the power play, but now he hasn't taken more than 2 shots in his last 4 games going into today, when, like, the one good thing about Dougie Hamilton is at least he takes a decent number of shots. So overall, if I ask you what to expect from Dougie over these next 9 games, are you going to give the poor Hamilton managers out there words of encouragement, expecting things to get better now that, hey, he's getting some more power play time? Or is there just more reasons that you're going to share to regret why we picked this guy in the second round in drafts like I did?
Before, sorry, I missed the start of your New Jersey. Did you mention the bet?
Yeah. Why'd you miss it? Okay, anyways. I did. It wasn't a bet. I just said how you were talking about Jason Robertson being better than him. And now I'm said that I'm even more confident than ever that Hughes is like a huge superstar.
And did you mention that he has 2 goals tonight?
Yes, I did.
Okay. No, I thought you did. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. All right. I think it's time to clarify something, Elon. I've never just first about Jack Hughes before we get to Dougie Hamilton. I like Jack Hughes. Okay. You love talking about how great he is and also suggesting I somehow disagree, which I don't. I think Jack Hughes has somehow become the most needlessly contentious player on keeping Karlsson on a guy. Usually we are the most contentious about players we actually agree on. We just use different words to describe. Like Jack Hughes, our conversation was about who to draft first in leagues next year between Jack Hughes and Jason Robertson. I mean, Jason Robertson has 15 goals in his last 22 games. With the 2 tonight, Jack Hughes now has 14 goals in his last 22 games and more assists than Jason Robertson has. So that might be appealing. But Jack Hughes, he does it all. And he looks really good doing it. And he and Jesper Bratt seem to have something really special going. So I love Jack Hughes. Elon, just cut that and play it over and over while you sleep one night, so we don't have to argue about how great Jack Hughes is. As for Dougie Hamilton,
if you were listening to what I said, I wasn't contentious at all. You should have actually listened to the words I said and not just what I wrote down, because it's not like your response is way intense compared to what I said.
Okay, so should I redo it with being less contentious?
I think a little. Like, I don't know, but I'm sure the people watching the YouTube will enjoy it, but it's like you're responding to something I didn't say.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I just said that I'm more confident than ever that he's gonna be like I like him even more, but I didn't say like take that Brian or anything like that.
Okay. Well, okay. All right. I assumed every time you've brought him up, it's been like, I don't know why you don't like him, Brian.
Oh, that's why I'm having a conversation with you now. I assume you're here to hear what I say.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna listen really closely. Okay. Our discussion on Jack Hughes, just to start with Jack Hughes, was about whether to draft Hughes or Jason Robertson first. It wasn't necessarily about who's better, and I made the argument that Jason Robertson...
I know, that's what I said. I said all of this.
I really blew it. Okay, so I'll just answer about Dougie.
Just answer about Dougie Hamilton. Okay. You don't need to...
All right. Okay, sorry. Elon, I'm sorry. I have no more good news about Dougie Hamilton than I did last time we spoke about him, which is when I said it's a bummer that he's not getting that top power play deployment at the time. Now he's got it, but he's still not shooting, which is one of the reasons that you draft Dougie Hamilton in those first 2 rounds, as you did. And one thing that has been bad news for Dougie Hamilton came on trade deadline day when Damon Severson did not get dealt. Like opening that spot wide open for Hamilton to come in and quarterback the power play. So top power play is good news for Hamilton, but it's still just not looking great that he's not able to do what he used to. And I don't think that's injuries. Like I feel like there's nothing else at play aside from the power play setup has changed, where it's not him allowed to bomb away nonstop on the top unit. And I wonder what this means for him next year. Like I could see him bouncing back completely and getting back almost all the value that he's lost over the last little while. But I guess the Devils are like, well, what we're doing is working out well enough for us. And it would be nice to see Dougie unleashed. There's nothing you can do but wait. Is that an awkward ending? Are you good?
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually to make matters even worse, I'm looking at this game today, New Jersey against Montreal, and it's back to Hamilton with no power play time. So it looks like Severson got the whole top power play for New Jersey, and along with Bastian, Nathan Bastian is getting more power play time than Dougie Hamilton. So let that sink in for you. Okay, Brian, we've still got a bunch now of 10 gamers coming up. And then a few 11 and 12 gamers to finish off the show. But first, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson.
All right, back on track.
All right.
I only have ears for you, Elon.
That would be. I'm excited. I'm plotzing right now. I can't even. Okay. All right, let's do this. All right, we are back. Those were some fun ads. I don't know. Okay, they're pre-inserted. What am I talking about here? Last week I had a fun time talking about HelloFresh. Maybe they haven't paid for this week. So let me just keep going here. And we've got some... Okay, Brian's shaking his head, which I assume means I should do this again. So that's again just for the YouTubers. All right, we are back. We are through the teams that are playing only 8 or 9 times over the next 3 weeks, most of our fantasy playoffs. Now we're getting into teams that are pretty good, and most of the teams in the league play 10 times, so like 4, 3, and 3 in some combination over these next 3 weeks. And we're going to drop a tidbit about each team, and let's start in Anaheim, which is a super boring team right now. Ryan Getzlaf is back, but at this point, I feel like who cares? He's slowed down big time since his hot start. He had no points and only 1 shot versus San Jose in his return yesterday. Honestly, even with 4 games, I feel like there might be nobody worth grabbing aside from like Zegras and Terry, who are probably rostered in most leagues. Like maybe you'd think you want the guy who's been playing with Zegras and Terry, like in the last game. I challenge the listeners to guess like who it was playing with Zegras and Terry in the last game. I feel like maybe 1% of you are going to get this correct, but it's someone named Derek Grant. So there you go. You could share that at dinner parties. But yeah, like Henrique, Milano, Silverberg, they all missed the last game with injury. Raquel and Hampus Lindholm are like off to greener pastures. This team just looks super shallow. I feel really bad for John Gibson, who's already having a tough year, and I think the end of the season is just going to get even tougher. He was just dropped in my Cupful division, where I'm rostering Kemper and Husso. Like at first I thought, okay, I've been wanting a goalie all year. I finally got Husso to pair up with Kemper, and now I'm seeing John Gibson dropped, and my first instinct was finally I could get Gibson for the playoffs. This is going to be great. Then I took a look and I was like, I don't know. I think I'm just going to leave him alone. So Brian, what, like, do you think I'm making the right choice here? Like, it's just like Anaheim looks even worse than they were before. What chance does John Gibson have to turn the season around?
I don't know, but the way he's playing, it's hard to have faith in John Gibson doing much of anything. Since the All-Star break, John Gibson has made 14 appearances. Just twice has he posted a save percentage above 900. Means 12 of 14 appearances, he's been below 900 save percentage. He's rocking an 857 since February 11th. Things are not good for John Gibson. And now that Josh Manson is gone and Hampus Lindholm is gone, honestly, that could be good or bad. Like if I were a real glass half full guy about John Gibson, I'd be saying, well, that's great. More action. He'll be busier. He had some of his best years on some Ducks teams that were really hanging him out to dry. But I just really have lost all confidence in John Gibson. I feel like he's lost confidence in himself. He'll be a really interesting guy to talk about on the Beat Writers series, except we can never. Okay, if you know how to contact somebody who is a beat writer or a very close follower of the Anaheim Ducks, please let us know. Year after year, we have failed to get a response from any Anaheim Duck. They don't even say no thanks. They just
I think
ghost us.
I think we have someone new this year. If you go to gamedaytweets.com. Oh no, I was talking about Allison Lozoff. If you go to gamedaytweets.com and go to Anaheim, that's where you can go and see the line combination tweets from every team. And I'm seeing that we did a lot of Allison Lozoff retweets this year. And that's not someone I think we've ever reached out to before. So I'm excited to try her out and see if we'll finally get one.
That would be great. It would be good to have a little bit of an inside view on what in the world has happened to John Gibson these last few years, where we've seen some small slices of what he used to do, but largely he's been nowhere near his formerly elite form. So Elon, you're asking if John Gibson should be plucked out of free agency. I think he's as risky as any other free agent goalie you could get. He might have some of the best upside, but really goalies are so random, it doesn't really matter. So he's just been downgraded to someone you can't rely on, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, maybe he's like a Sam Montembeault type back before Jake Allen came back. Like every once in a while he'll have a good game, but always a risk to play. And that's how I kind of feel about Gibson right now, which is a bummer. But yeah, he'll need to show us a stretch, and I just really don't see it happening, especially on this team. Next, another team that plays 10 times over these next 3 weeks, starting with 4 times next week, are the Arizona Coyotes. And I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting Arizona to have pretty much the same team before and after the deadline. But I look at the top 6 from Friday. I see Keller, Schmaltz, Galchenyuk were one line, Kessel, Krause, and Boyd another line. Gostisbehere is still quarterbacking the top power play. Chikrin is still in the IR, but on the team. Vejmelka still in the net. I guess the biggest change was they sent Scott Wedgwood to Dallas. And then they decided to just, make life hard for the Maple Leafs by claiming Harry Sateri after the Leafs tried to sign him. And right now, Sateri has visa issues. So, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if Karel Vejmelka gets all 4 games next week. I think the other option is Koranash or Kajanash, however that's pronounced. But I just I'm pretty sure it's Kajanash. But I don't think it matters because I would be surprised if he gets into a game. And next week, Arizona plays Edmonton, San Jose, Anaheim, and Chicago. So some tough opponents, some maybe nice ones. So I'm pretty into Karel Vejmelka for the rest of the season. Sorry, I'm having so much trouble pronouncing all of these complicated names here on the Coyotes. But yeah, I feel like Vejmelka could be kind of like a cheat code, especially in categories leagues that count saves. If you're going to get 4 games out of a goalie that's had many 40-plus save games on the season, that's something you want to look at. He's only 13% rostered. If I was Dave Benton, I haven't listened to this week's stream scheme yet. It's posted, but I'd imagine that Dave should make Vejmelka the goalie stream of the week because he's only 13% rostered on Yahoo, so he definitely qualifies. He also just signed a 3-year deal. So, Brian, maybe along with commenting on if you think Vejmelka is good for the rest of this season, I'm curious if you think we've seen enough from him to expect him to be the real deal moving forward. Like, would it be crazy to draft him? Let's say you're going to drafts next year, you're looking at Vejmelka and John Gibson. To me right now, Vejmelka seems like the better bet.
Vejmelka, I don't know if I could say better bet, especially because, well, Anaheim is now in the retool on the rebuild. So I feel like Anaheim is going to be in better shape than Arizona, though they have a couple big pieces missing on their blue line. So team quality, I think, might still go to Gibson next year. But Vejmelka is, I mean, either he has risen. I think a combination of Vejmelka has risen and Gibson has fallen to the point that they are discussable on the same sort of platform. On the season, Vejmelka is playing below his expected save percentage, but over the last month, he's playing above it. So there is potential here. Now that Vejmelka is showing, he's playing his best hockey of the season right now. You're asking if I've seen enough to know if he's the real deal. I don't know, but I'm interested. I'm not writing him off. He's 904 on the season this year, just a 47% quality start percentage. And he's been sub 906 of his last 11 starts, even while playing near or above his expected save percentage numbers. So go figure that one out. But Vejmelka is not Mr. Reliable, right? But he is someone that I want to see more from. My guess right now, if I had to make a guess, which is pointless because we're talking about goalies, but I feel like his future holds more of the same kinds of ups and downs that we've seen from him for all of this year, but maybe a few more ups and a few fewer downs. He's still just 25 years old, so I'll hold up hope. There is some room for Vejmelka to grow, but I do subscribe to the goalies don't improve theory. It's really rare, and we've talked about this on the show, that a goalie changes substantially from their first body of NHL work for the better. They can get worse, but they rarely, try and think right now of a player. I mean, you'll think of Cam Talbot maybe and Martin Jones, some of these backups who exploded onto the scene when they got big opportunities, but try and think of a goalie who started off like being meh and lasted long enough in the league to actually come up. Tweeted us at Keeping Karlsson. If you have any.
You can ask me.
Okay, Darcy Kemper.
Oh yeah, he's one. What about Scott Wedgwood? All of a sudden this year is having a good year when he's been a nobody forever.
Yeah, well, we'll get to him too. I mean, I don't think he's necessarily shown enough to have been improved, but I'll save more about him for when we do.
When we get to Dallas. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Vejmelka ahead of Gibson. Honestly, my answer to this question might depend on who the backups are for each of them and who's going to get more starts. Like, I think Anthony Stoltz is actually pretty good, and I think he could push John Gibson if the Ducks let him. Anyway, I see them on similar footing at this point, especially in leagues where volume is rewarded as much rate. So, Elon, I love that you're already looking at Vejmelka for next season, and I think you'd be right to have him on your radar.
Okay, but you agree with me that for this year, Vejmelka over Gibson at this point, right? You're talking just for
Yes.
next year, maybe it's close. Okay, yeah. And by the way, right now it's 1-0 for Winnipeg over Arizona, just starting the third period today, and Vejmelka has stopped 24 of 25. So we'll see if he can hold out or if things blow up at the end. But yeah, good game for him potentially again today. Okay, another 10-game team is the Edmonton Oilers. They play 4 times next week. It's a streamagami, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and then 3 times in the following 2 weeks. We did a lot of talking about Puljujarvi or Yamamoto, like who's going to be on the top power play. Like once Ryan Nugent-Hopkins comes back, we were like, oh, there's only going to be room for one of those guys, Puljujarvi or Yamamoto. Maybe Yamamoto gets bumped. Anyways, of course, with all of this discussion, the Oilers had to shake things up, and they gave Zach Hyman the spot instead of both of Puljujarvi or Yamamoto in the game on Saturday. And Zach Hyman had a power play assist in that crazy game versus Calgary where the Flames destroyed Edmonton 9-5. Anyways, one thing I'm very happy about from the show I did with Edmonton last Thursday, which by the way, I had so much fun on. I don't know if Ben is listening. I'm sure he is at some point. But Ben, like that was great. Like I still think about how much fun I had on that Short Shifts episode. I think people should go listen to it. If you're only like mega show listener guy, like if you're only someone that listens to the mega show and you decided for whatever reason you don't have time to listen to Short Shifts, which I definitely disagree with. But yeah, I think we've been having some really fun shows over there. Okay, what am I talking about? If you're only someone who listens to the mega show and not Short Shifts, you're not doing it right. There's a lot of great shows with Ben and Lewis on Short Shifts, and Ben and I had a good one. Anyways, one thing we discussed on that last show on Thursday was Ben was asking if I'd prefer Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or one of these like Yamamoto or Puljujarvi, considering those were the guys that were getting better deployment, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was slotted to only come back on the third line. I'm happy I said Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I said, I know it may be boring, but he's just like the reliable player. What a game on Saturday. A goal and 3 assists, 3 shots. Plus, the Oilers, again, have the streamagami next week. So I'm sure people who have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on their team are very happy to have him back in their lineup. And I'd imagine you'd also be still interested in your Puljujarvis, your Yamamotos, and let me even throw a new name at you. How about Derrick Brassard, who is available all over the place. He scored in his first 2 games as an Oiler, playing with Nugent Hopkins on that third line. He had a goal and 4 shots versus Calgary. He was also on a nice run with Philly. He had 4 points in his final 6 games before he got traded. So, Brian, we've talked about Jonathan Taves, Dodonov, Taylor Radish. Does Derrick Brassard, cut into that group of players? Is he in that caliber, or is he a step below?
I think he's a step below. Brassard going into today, 2 goals on 6 shots, and it only played 23 minutes in both games combined. Brassard had played 13 and a half minutes in his first game in Edmonton, and then less than 10 minutes in his second game at Edmonton. And he's playing on this weird line, right? There's no McDavid or Draisaitl. As you mentioned, Elon, he's with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, whose line is, I don't know if there's a better way to put this than saying Nugent-Hopkins' line is a bit of a dumping ground right now. It's Brassard and Puljujarvi, both who have some kind of potential, but both who I expect to be pretty quiet alongside Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And I don't quite see the full set of logic around it, but I also don't know where else to put them. And I feel like that's why I'm calling it a dumping ground, not as a negative way to talk about Nugent-Hopkins and Puljujarvi, but I don't think Brassard is a real legitimate part of a line that can score a lot, and I don't think Brassard is a guy I expect to really be a big scorer. So I would put Brassard at the bottom of that pile that you mentioned.
All right, fair enough. Though for people in deep enough leagues, like I said, Edmonton plays 4 times next week. I think Brassard is in a decent enough spot to at least get you a couple points in those 4 games. You can compare him to the other options. Let's go now to the Florida Panthers, who play 10 times in the next 3 weeks. Also 4 times next week. I mean, how many shows in a row can I drool over this team? And now Claude Giroux fitting in like a glove. 2 assists Saturday versus Ottawa in the 4-3 overtime win. I think they're playing again today. I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, so Toronto is beating Florida currently 3-2. No points for Giroux yet. What do we got here? Brandon Montour and Ryan Lomberg. All right, these are boring goals. Anyway, the Panthers are great. Duclair, we were worried about Duclair potentially getting bumped from the top power play, but they've been going with this 5 forward configuration, and he actually had a power play goal in Saturday's game, so you're not really worried about him. Really, the 2 cold names that are likely on a lot of rosters, and people are wondering if they're going to stick for the rest of the year, are Carter Verhaeghe, who has only 2 points in his last 6 games going into today, and Sam Bennett, who had 1 point in only 8 games going into today, but I see he has an assist today for whatever it's worth. Brian, if you had to pick right now, who's going to get more points for the rest of the season between Verhaeghe and Sam Bennett?
I'm going to lean Carter Verhaeghe. I think he might have the better floor and Bennett the higher ceiling, but if you're asking me to pick, which you are, I'll take Verhaeghe. I've just kind of lost faith in Sam Bennett. Huge drop for Bennett, by the way, from this time last year when he had just been traded to Florida and was getting fired up to now. It's also been a huge drop for Bennett from 3 months ago to now. So congrats to anyone who managed to sell high, especially in a keeper, which I failed to do in one of my leagues. But I tried. Bennett could for sure be highly effective and impactful the rest of the year, but the road schedule just doesn't favor him, as we talked about on the last over the last couple of weeks. And it's concerning that he's not putting up numbers with Huberdeau and Duclair. And now it's well, was Calgary right about Sam Bennett after all? Has Florida just been carrying this guy on their backs? So we'll see what Bennett can do. And it would be nice if he dispelled some of those notions, those negative notions that we have about him. But I feel like Carter Verhaeghe is the safer pick and is likely to do at least as well as Bennett will the rest of the way.
Yeah, and you gotta say, they both have great line mates, right? Bennett's playing with Duclair and Huberdeau, but Verhaeghe's playing with Barkov and Giroux, 2 players who have been 100-plus point guys. So if you're just looking at the line mates, maybe Verhaeghe has the slight edge there. This team, they're good. They're losing to Toronto right now, though. So we'll see how this game plays out. Let's go to LA next, where they play 4 times next week and then 3-3 in the following 2 weeks. Victor Arvidsson is back, which seems to be great news for everyone on and off his line. If you recall, Anze Kopitar was cold, but he's going again. He's got 5 points in his last 3 games. I wonder if this is one of those things where when you have a strong second line, then the opposition doesn't focus so much on the top line. I know, but we were just kind of also saying that Kopitar was just cold because he was just whatever, not having as many shots going. It's not as if he was playing any worse. But either way, seems to be working out for Kopitar that Arvidsson's back, even though they don't play together at even strength. And I think that he's obviously someone that I'm hoping that people listen to what we were saying and held on to him through the cold streak. Kopi's line mates, Kempe and Iafallo, both starting to produce again as well. They both assisted on Kopitar's goal yesterday. And then the Danault, Arvidsson, Moore line are back together and looking great together again, both picking up lots of points. So is it fair to say all 6 of these guys make for a great stream, at least for that Monday, Wednesday, Thursday start to the week. There's actually only 2 teams that play 3 times in the first 4 days next week, Carolina and LA. So if you really want to optimize that schedule, you want to grab someone that plays, let's say, 3 times in 4 days, then you swap for someone playing like Friday, Saturday, and you can swap for someone playing Sunday, and you've got like potentially 6 games that week from one roster spot. So that's what makes me especially interested in LA. Like I said, we've got 6 top sixers that are all getting some points lately with Kopitar, Kempe, and Iafallo, and then Danault, Arvidsson, Moore. What do you think? How into these these various Kings are you?
I'm into all of them. As you said, I think the whole Kings top 6 is worth taking a shot on. There have been some really cold players in it. Anybody who's suffered through the cold stretch of Adrian Kempe, especially, if you made it this far, congratulations. You deserve to be rewarded. But Iafallo had also been cold, and Trevor Moore had been cold. But all of these guys have the potential to put up a point every single night, and I would be happy to stream them for a 4-game week.
Yeah, and also Sean Dursey. We mentioned him last week already. We said that he's the top power play guy that you should be interested in. Power play goal yesterday versus Seattle. So again, if you're looking for someone to add for these next 4 days, I really think you should be looking at Sean Dursey if you need a defenseman, because yeah, he's got that top power play spot locked in, and he's even doing something with it. All right, next let's go to the New York Rangers. They also play 10 times over the next 3 weeks, starting with 4 games next week, and we've got 2 brand new players in the top 6 taking over those 2 third wheel spots. Vatrano has been playing with Zibanejad and Kreider, while Andrew Kopp has been playing with Panarin and Strome. So too bad for Alexis Lafreniere and Dryden Hunt. I guess maybe better luck next year, especially for Lafreniere. Hopefully he'll get a shot in the top 6 again and not do nothing. But yeah, in the 5-1 win over Pittsburgh for the Rangers on Friday, both Vatrano and Andrew Kopp scored a goal. And then today, the Rangers had a win over the Buffalo Sabres. They won 5-4 in overtime. And let's take a look here. Frank Vatrano, 2 goals. Beautiful. Andrew Kopp, 2 assists. Look at that. I guess Kopp was probably assisting on goals from Panarin, I'm going to guess. Let me just confirm that. Oh, okay. Andre Miller scored the overtime winner from Lafreniere and Kopp, actually. And then Kopp also assisted, on a Panarin goal. So, yeah, these are 2 good lines to be on. I guess we were just talking before about... Wait, who was it? Who was it that was saying, like, 2 guys playing in the top 6 in, like, these great spots?
Verhaeghe and Bennett?
No, like, earlier than that. Oh, no. Am I wrong?
I don't think...
Maybe there wasn't anyone.
I don't think so.
Oops.
Maybe the Ducks? I don't think so.
Okay, well, whatever. Look about Verhaeghe and Bennett playing with good line mates. Definitely you look at Vatrano and Kopp, and they're also playing with very, very good line mates. And they're already doing more than like Alexis Lafreniere. I don't want to pile on Lafreniere, but it's like, come on! All of a sudden, what? Frank Vatrano comes in, and now he's like just crushing it with Zibanejad and Kreider. Can't just be luck, right? So I'm very interested, especially for a 4-game week next week. Both of these guys are interesting to me. What do you think, Brian? Is there one that's more so than the other? And either way, do you concur that they should probably be rostered for a 4-game week?
Coming into today, I wasn't going to suggest that Frank Vatrano should be rostered, because coming into today, he had 2 goals in 3 games, sure, but only 5 shots, and was playing fewer than 14 minutes in his last game. So now he's got 2 more goals. So I'm a little more interested, but we talked about him recently and saying the guy who plays with Panarin, who fills out that line, is not a lock to actually produce with Panarin. So keep that in mind. Andrew Kopp, I had more of an open mind.
Wait, sorry, Brian. Vatrano is the one playing with Zibanejad.
Oh, what did I say?
You said Vatrano. You were talking about Vatrano, and then you said you want the guy playing with Panarin. But Vatrano's not the guy playing with Panarin.
Right. Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Do you want to start from the beginning? How you were like saying I wouldn't have been interested in before today?
Okay, sure. I wouldn't have been that interested in Vatrano before today. He had a couple goals, but in 3 games on 5 shots, which 2 goals on 5 shots in 3 games. That's not a lovely line. That's a nice streamer line, which is basically what we said Vatrano can be. But now he has another 2 goals on 3 shots tonight, which is nice. And he actually played over 18 minutes compared to the game before. We'd played 13 and a half. So actually, he erased a bunch of my concerns about him with today's performance. So I'm a little more into Vatrano than I was before today's game, which is to say, if anybody's moving the needle that much in one game, then they're still probably streamer territory, but playing in the Rangers top 6 does make him interesting. And then you have Andrew Kopp, who, as you said, Elon picked up those 2 assists today, and his ice time keeps rising with the Rangers. He played 19 minutes today after starting with 17 minutes and then 18 minutes. So he's going in a nice linear upwards trajectory. He's got a few, like now, 5 points in 3 games and putting up not many shots, which isn't great. I think both of them, I'm not running for these guys. They might be the sort that I wait until Friday to get for those 2 off day games towards the end of the week in New York, Friday and Sunday. And I think I'd actually go get Kopp first, but it's probably a push between them. Vetrano seems more likely to put up a few shots, and Kopp seems more likely to take face-offs and put up other peripherals like a hit or a block. That's neither one. I'm not going to boot someone out of my Tuesday or Thursday lineups for them, but I would like to look at them for an off day game.
Sure, yeah, if you have the option. I have a feeling with the, week they've just had, you might not have the option. I think you might have to grab them early or someone else is going to. So obviously you have to consider compared to the rest of your league. I've always had a soft spot for Vetrano. I don't know what it is. I guess he just had like some big shot numbers in Florida like over the years, at least once in a while. So now seeing him with Zibanejad, I'm just like really excited to see what he can do there. So he's someone I'm a little more interested in, but I think that might be a little bit of heart there, like battling with head, just because I've kind of liked him for so long and it's cool to finally see him in a good spot. Let's go now to Seattle, who also, again, 10 games the next 3 weeks, 4-3-3. The last team we're going to talk about that goes 4-3-3 over the next 3 weeks in terms of their games played. We've said a million times that sometimes at the trade deadline, the players who get the biggest bumps are not the players who got traded, but more so the players who like took over the roles from the players who got moved. And that seems to be the case here in Seattle, with Vince Dunn putting up a 5-game point streak before finally going cold versus LA on Saturday. He's now the top power play guy. We already talked about him on a recent show, but I feel like if you need D, we talked about Sean Dursey. I might like Sean Dursey more just because I don't know, but whatever. But like some leagues, you don't have access to top power play guys very often. So I'm always going to shout out a low percent rostered top power play guy, especially one that's producing, and Vince Dunn meets that criteria. So there he is. And like I said, Seattle plays 4 times next week. So definitely someone that should be at the top of people's watch list, if not on their rosters.
For sure. Dunn was on a big roll. It started before Mark Giordano left town and has continued since then, bolstered by 2 power play points that he picked up over a stretch of 3 games while on the top unit. And Vince Dunn saw more than 25 minutes a couple games ago and a 73% share of Seattle's power play time, both of which are essentially high watermarks for the season for Vince Dunn. As you said, Elon, his 5-game point streak was snapped against LA, and it was nearly a cardio night for him, posting zeros across the board except for 1 block and 1 hit, despite seeing 22.5 minutes and 60% of the team's power play minutes. I think Dunn will continue to be a frustrating guy to have, but perhaps there's a bit better of a chance that he's going to pay off than usual. So yeah, I would jump on Vince Dunn for the big week. I would also still feel kind of fickle if he doesn't produce or like take any shots over the first couple games, which is perfectly possible. But I hope that's not what's going to happen. I hope that you'll add Vince Dunn and he'll help you out. And I think he's a guy, unlike where I was on Vetrano and Kopp, which is like, well, yeah, I don't think you need to run to those guys. I would go ahead and get Dunn to start the week. And then, yeah, you could drop him if it goes south, but I'd want him from the outset.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I think I will just not as strongly agree with you as I normally do, just because Seattle just like, I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in them to score goals. Or that's why I said I like Dursey more than Dunn, just because I'd rather have the top power play guy on a team that actually scores goals. And like Seattle now have just, traded away some good players. I think that Jaden Schwartz is injured. So, at some point I get a little worried that they're just not going to score much, kind of like Anaheim for the rest of the way. But Vince Dunn is going to probably be in on most power play goals. So there's something there, but I don't know. I still would take those New York guys ahead, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about last week that Seattle just does not have a very good power play. So being power play quarterback in Seattle might not actually amount to much. I was just buoyed by seeing him put up 2 power play points in 3 games and thinking maybe he can help.
I wonder if our listeners could name like all the top 6 players. Like, I don't know, like this team is like all of a sudden looking really shallow, right? I see that Carson Kuhlman was playing with Yanni Gourde and Victor Rask is on Seattle. Did anyone know this? I guess he got traded there from Minnesota. Okay, good for him. Wenberg. Oh yeah, Wenberg. Remember when people were talking at the beginning of the year?
He's been good.
Yeah, he's been okay. Yeah. And Ryan Donato. I remember at the beginning of the year, a lot of people had high hopes because we were thinking that maybe Seattle will be the next Vegas, and all the players who used to be kind of nobodies that we had heard of but never did much. And I remember like a lot of people were talking about these guys. Hasn't really turned out that well for any of them. Maybe like Jared McCann. He's having a pretty decent year.
Wenberg, by the way, 5 points in his last 8. But he's taken no shots in his last 2 games, which is pretty much classic Alex Wenberg.
He's like a Marcus Johansson to me. Like it's almost like even when I see he's
Yeah.
gotten points, I still don't care. I'm not
Yeah, I
interested. Yeah.
agree.
All right, Boston plays 10 times, only 3 times next week, then 4, then 3. They are so good, this team. They've really turned it up lately. Their 6-3 win over the Islanders was their 7th win in 8 games. Everyone is hot. Pasternak, Hall, Marchand, McAvoy. Bergeron was injured, but he came back, had an assist and 4 shots in his return on Saturday versus the Islanders. So hopefully he'll be, ready to go for the rest of the season, aside from being benched for a couple, games before the playoffs like he always does. I'm going to throw 2 guys at you right now that are still available in free agency in a lot of leagues and are screaming as potential ads. I'm curious to know who you like better. It's a little bit of apples and oranges here because I'm going to compare a forward to a defenseman. I just want to get a vibe check of who you're more excited about. Erik Haula has been playing with Hall and Pasternak. He's had 3 straight multi-point games now from his line with those 2 great players. And yeah, by the way, Taylor Hall, I mean, we're just not going to get into him because I assume he's rostered. Like, if you're in a league where Taylor Hall is still available, you definitely want him at this point. He's doing really well. But okay, so Erik Haula. Then also I wanted to bring up Hampus Lindholm, who got traded to Boston, had a really good first game, picking up an assist and 4 shots. He now has an assist, 6 shots, 7 hits in those first 2 games with the team. So a little bit of a quieter second game for Lindholm, but getting big minutes right away, playing on that top pairing with McAvoy and also on power play too. Do one of these names jump out to you? Because we all have options for lots of defensemen, lots of forwards. So, let's say you have options from other teams. You're just like, I'm just getting, again, a vibe check. Haula and Lindholm, who do you think is more likely to be worth rostering like for the rest of the season?
I'm going to go with Erik Haula. We're digging deep here. Lindholm, by the way, is actually playing fewer minutes in Boston than he was in Anaheim, which isn't surprising. That's kind of what we predicted. So I expect him to still be able to take a couple shots at the game, but I feel like Lindholm's hits are him, trying to impress his new team. I feel like that's what a player does. You join a new team, you got to show them you're bought in and invested. You throw your body around, block an extra shot here or there, and then that sort of tapers off. And I wonder if that's what's happening with Lindholm right now. It is apples and oranges because you're getting different things from Haula and Lindholm. But for upside, I would try Erik Haula going for another run with Taylor Hall and David Pasternak. By the way, I'm actually going to divert off of Erik Haula and Hampus Lindholm because neither one is exciting. I don't know that we've talked enough about Taylor Hall and how freaking good he's been. Like, he is producing like a star. Again, 38 points in 43 games since December 9th. So for most of the season now, Taylor Hall is producing at a 75-point pace and also tracking for about 3 shots per game. So that's almost 250 shots and 75 points over an 82-game season. I was thinking it's going to be interesting to dig into Taylor Hall next season because he was a drop at one point this season, and now he's nearly a point per game player. But I actually don't think there's a whole lot to dig into because basically Hall's run coincides exactly at the moment that he began playing with Pasternak and Haula instead of playing with some mix of Charlie Coyle, Craig Smith, and Nick Foligno, which isn't surprising. I mean, I would have liked him to carry a line by himself, but this is working. And I think Boston might keep letting it run. Of course, depending on Bergeron's health and what his future looks like, that could throw a wrench into some of this. But Taylor Hall, holy cow, if you were able to pick him up out of free agency by anyone who'd given up on him, you scored finding some free money in free agency.
Yeah, I definitely had the opportunity to get him in a couple of leagues and kicking myself big time. It's been like years, and they every once in a while would bring Pasternak to that second line, and it would never last. I think when it happened this year, we were like, it probably won't last, and it has. And it's like I just said, they've been winning like 7 of the last 8 games. It's clearly working out just fine. Bergeron was injured. That didn't change anything. So yeah, I guess this might be something that's going to stick, and it'll be interesting over the summer to discuss if we think it'll still stick next year. We'll have to get Fluto Shinzawa back to discuss and get his opinion. Let's go now to the Calgary Flames, who play again. We're on teams that play 10 times over the next 3 weeks. They go 3, 4, then 3. I'm gotta tell you, I'm getting pretty excited for a potential Flames and Avalanche conference final. I really hope it happens. They seem like the 2 best teams in the conference, especially after that shellacking that Calgary put on Edmonton yesterday. Honestly, I can't really think of anyone to talk about here that we haven't talked about a lot. Like, yeah, Gadreau, Tkachuk, and Lindholm continue to be like insane. Toffoli's fitting in fantastically. Backlund, Coleman, Mangiapane, like solid supporting pieces that we've discussed a lot. Even Chris Tanev gets points now, which is nice. So I don't know. Nothing's really changed, I think, since the last time we talked about the Flames. So I'm just good to move on unless you have some interesting Flames topics to bring up yourself.
I will at least talk about how great the Flames are doing. Well, actually, first, I'll mention Tyler Toffoli, who, was off the first line. It doesn't matter. He got 2 assists anyway. Only 8 shots for Toffoli over his last 5 games, which is not what we like to see from him. So I feel like we could probably talk about Toffoli every week and it'll be a different flavor of we're really excited about him or this is disappointing. His value could just yo-yo over the rest of the season. So be ready for that roller coaster. If you have Tyler Toffoli, the good news is I think points will still keep coming more often than not. Johnny Gadreau, we talked about how amazing he's been. You talked about them as conference semifinal or conference finalists, and I think that's legit. And we just need to Johnny Gadreau is looking amazing. We talked about him when we were talking about Matthew Tkachuk last week, and how about Jacob Markstrom too? Speaking of some of our preseason talk, Elon, it was the Markstrom versus Demko conversation that went on, and I actually haven't compared their save percentages straight up. I feel like this is one we both won, which is
yeah.
nice.
I mean, well, I think that both of them have turned out to be goalies, which are getting more and more rare in the NHL. They play all the games, and so it's just if you got Markstrom or Demko, you were happy. But I think you're obviously a lot happier with Markstrom because if your league counts wins, Calgary is obviously winning a lot more games than Vancouver is.
Well, here's the thing. How many more wins do you think Markstrom has than Demko this year?
The way you ask
Without
it.
looking.
Yeah, it makes me think that it's maybe closer. I would have thought maybe 10 more wins. Was that not the case?
3 more wins for Jacob Markstrom, and Demko has started just 1 additional game.
So there you go. They're both great. So when you were listening to Brian and I arguing about Demko versus Markstrom, hopefully what you took away from it was just draft both of them and you'll be happy.
We both felt very passionate about it, so maybe that was a sign. Demko has a 917 compared to Markstrom's 925. They both have similar quality start percentages. Markstrom's is a touch higher, about 57%. And also Markstrom has been a little lately, sub 900 6 times in his last 12, but somehow he's still only lost twice in regulation, which speaks to how freaking good, coming full circle, the Calgary Flames have been this year. So way to go Markstrom, way to go Gadreau, way to go Toffoli, way to go everyone on Calgary. Keep it up.
Yeah, Gadreau is probably not going to get there, but he's been sneaking into the Art Ross conversation recently. He is up there in total points. Actually, let me just put a edit point here. Let me get the exact numbers for you. But I just saw a tweet.
114 point pace.
Yeah, compared to okay, let me just get it up here. Stats. I got it. You don't even need to look. I got it here. Okay. As of this recording, Connor McDavid leads the race. He has 97 points. Next is Leon Draisaitl with 94 points. And third is Johnny Gaudreau with 90 points. So it's not inconceivable that he can continue to make up ground. And I'm not saying I would bet on it, but I think there's definitely a chance. And who would have expected Johnny Gaudreau to be a top 3 point getter going into this season? What a turnaround for a guy who the coach wasn't it last year. The coach was how do you feel about Gadreau playing in his 500th game or whatever it was? And the coach was I hope he puts more effort than he did in his 499th game. I remember something like that.
Yeah. So, this is the follow-up season that we were expecting from 2018-19. It was just delayed by a couple years. It's really nice to see. And we'll dig in more, but I talked about how Matthew Tkachuk was for real last week. And I feel like I wouldn't take a whole lot away from what Johnny Gaudreau has done this year either.
Yeah, the Flames could be in the Cup Finals. If they go against Colorado, I feel like the odds shouldn't be too crazily favored towards Colorado. I think Colorado would be the favorite, but I think that Calgary shouldn't be too far behind at this point.
But Elon, we know one of them is going to get swept 4-0 in the first round.
Please,
so why even talk about it?
I want to have some fun this playoffs, okay? All right, let's go to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Not in the same caliber, but they are the same in that they play 10 times over these next 3 weeks. 3 games, then 4 games, and 3 games. The injuries are really piling up for the poor Blue Jackets. Jenner is still week to week. Then it was announced that Jonas Korpisalo would be out for the season a few days ago. And now most recently, Zach Werenski left Saturday's game after suffering an upper body injury in the first. I don't think we have an update on Werenski yet. But in that game, by the way, Adam Boqvist was scratched. So Jake Bean took over the top power play duties, and he had himself actually a nice game. He scored a goal, took 5 shots, had 24 minutes, 39 seconds of ice time. Obviously, this was a game where things were in flux because the injury happened mid-game. But we've already talked about some new potential top power play defensemen. Your Vince Dunns and your Durseys. And I think last episode we talked about a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them right now in the league if you look around. And so maybe Jake Bean could be the next one. Obviously, you could check out the lines, but I kind of feel like even if he is, it's still not someone you're going to rush for because who knows how long it will last, A. And also, this isn't the most Well, we saw what Boqvist did, right? Like Boqvist didn't do much when he got that opportunity. I remember, Brian, you got really mad at me when I suggested that you should consider Adam Boqvist, then he really didn't work out for you, right?
Yeah, that was I mean, you give me a lot of great advice, Elon. That might have been like the worst sort of like when in our discussions. That might have been the worst piece you gave me this year, which is okay. Like it's bound to happen. I'm not mad at you for I ultimately pulled the trigger and was like, yeah, okay, I'll try it out. And it actually really stung. But I think at the end of the day, it probably didn't make a difference one way or the other. But looking at Jack Bean. But looking at Jake Bean, it's nice to see him put up some numbers. I mean, we haven't seen anyone aside from Werenski succeed consistently from the blue line in Columbus this year. Remember Vladislav Gavrikov? Like he had a short run, and then we saw like maybe a little hint from Boqvist. But I'd love to see if Bean gets an opportunity here, if he can run with it. He was someone who was projected to have this kind of upside as a prospect, as someone who could run a power play. And if Jake Bean can put up another game with 3 or more shots on goal, I'd be more into him than Vince Dunn. I'd be more into him than Hampus Lindholm. I might put him on like Sean Dursey level, but I would like to see more from him, but that's very contingent on Werenski staying out. So if Werenski's out and Bean has one more good game, yeah, I'll get a little excited. For now, we've seen so little from him that it's hard to convince ourselves he's really worth it, but I would love to see him get an opportunity.
Yeah, I wonder how Columbus fans are feeling right now. Like, I almost would kind of think like this is the second Werenski injury this year. They're not going to make the playoffs. At this point, are you just hoping that Werenski is just out for the year? Hopefully, that leads to Columbus losing more games, getting a higher draft pick. Like at this point, like what is the reason to kind of root for Werenski? But obviously, for fantasy purposes, you're really hoping Werenski comes back if you've been riding him this season. That's for sure. Oh, by the way, an interesting point by Shams here in the chat. You know how Brian, you said that Markstrom's had a couple bad games recently. Shams is pointing out that he's been thrown in a couple of back-to-backs. Shams has mentioned that he's been thrown in for a couple of back-to-back games recently, so maybe that's what's leading him to have worse numbers, since goalies generally need some rest and not just to play every single day. To me, it doesn't make any sense why Calgary, like they're clearly in the playoffs, they're cruising at this point. Why not just play Vladar on a back-to-back and not risk injuring or tiring out Markstrom? I don't get it, but what are you gonna do? Okay, I'm not the coach.
As has been pointed out by Mason and our patron group, Nico Dawes, speaking of back-to-backs, has now started 3 consecutive sets of back-to-back starts, and like all within he listed the dates here: March 15th, 16th, March 22nd, 23rd, and March 26th, 27th. That's 3 back-to-backs fully started by Nico Dawes in 3 weeks. And I believe New Jersey has another back-to-back coming up this week. So we'll see what happens with it. And he's been doing okay. I mean, I think the truth is that New Jersey has literally nobody else who gives them any remote chance to win. John Gillies has not been it. So it's fun. And he's a guy. Why we didn't talk about him in New Jersey. We probably should have.
Yeah, we've talked about him a lot. Yeah, Nico Dawes plays a lot. It makes sense to play him in the back-to-backs. Like, his season's going to be over soon, okay? He doesn't need to be rested. Markstrom's hopefully going to have a long playoff run ahead, so he's the one who needs to maybe get some rest, I would think.
Well, and Matt in our patron group who follows the Devils pretty closely added that, you know, the Devils want to see as much Dawes as they can. And I haven't heard this from anyone except Matt in our Discord server, keepingkarlsson.com/patron, if you're interested and want to join. But Matt is saying rumblings, which was my favorite rumor words. Rumblings say Blackwood may get traded in the offseason. And I mean, if Dawes does well enough, I could see that being possible. Blackwood can't stay healthy. He's been disappointing when he has been healthy. And he, if I remember right, Elon, he's one of the last players to get vaccinated, which, you know, his choice, but perhaps maybe didn't win him some fans in the team's front office and in the locker room.
I mean, if I could give some of the, sorry.
Like Tyler, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll just add. Like Tyler Bertuzzi, also, you know, rumored to have been asking for a fresh start out of Detroit. So Blackwood was in a similar position. Maybe he needs a fresh start too.
Yeah, I mean, if I were managing the Devils, like, you know, like if they were asking me for like advice, like if a fantasy team does on Twitter, you know, I would usually say you don't trade a player when their value is at it's rock bottom because you're not going to get a good return. Like I'd rather bring Blackwood back, try to showcase him, and then get something else. Because what's a team going to give for Blackwood right now that's like missed almost the whole season and stunk when he did play? But I guess maybe if they really just have no faith in him, then yeah, you might as well at least get something for him. So I guess it depends how badly they think he's going to perform once they get him back in the net, like if and when that happens. Brian, who would you like moving forward for the rest of this season? Nico Dawes, two volume guys, Nico Dawes or Karl Vejmelka? Who do you think is going to be better?
I knew that was coming. I mean, you really want to talk about Vejmelka and talk him up. I think Vejmelka might have the greater extremes, like the greater awesome starts and the worst starts. And Nico Dawes is going to be like a little bit below average, kind of a little more even keel. But I think I'd swing for the fences with Karl Vejmelka. I think he has a little more potential to really steal some weeks compared to Nico Dawes.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay, let's go now to your Ottawa Senators. 10 games over the next 3 weeks, just like everyone we've been talking about recently. 3 games, 4 games, 3 games. I'll be honest, Brian, I came up with the idea for this podcast and ranking all these teams before I actually looked at the schedules and realized how many teams are exactly the same. But here we go. Ottawa, first of all, welcome back Drake Batherson. And he went right back to the top line and top power play, picked up an assist on a first period Artem Zub goal versus the Panthers. He had also 2 shots and 5 hits. So I'm sure fantasy managers are very excited to get Batherson back right before their fantasy playoffs. If somehow you're in one of the 39% of Yahoo leagues where he's available, this is a obvious pause the pod. Like, if you don't have him on your team, don't even tweet at us to be like, should I drop this person for, like, the answer is probably yes. He's very good, I think. Okay, you can still tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson if you really want advice, but you'd have to be in a really shallow league for me to not be saying you should jump on Batherson, especially if your league counts hits. He's up to 35 points in 32 games on the season right now. Like, I'm wondering if this injury is almost going to, like, deflate his draft value for next year. I feel like if he would have just been able to keep going, and if he obviously would have kept this up, then the cat would be completely out of the bag, and people would be taking him like a top 3, top 4 round pick next year. I wonder if next year will be like your last chance to get Batherson early, or am I just like getting too excited and maybe this is like too small sample size to think that this is now like a 75, 80 point guy with big peripherals?
I was actually saying you might not be getting excited enough. I think it's going to be hard to get Batherson late next year. You're going to have to pay full price for Drake Batherson after the season he's had. Like, unfortunately, he was injured, robbed of an amazing season, but I love that he's already come back firing on all cylinders. Apparently, this was the biggest injury and layoff that Batherson had ever had in his career. And he was open about, I'm not sure how I'll feel. I've never been away this long. That's great. And the great news for Batherson is he has now played one more NHL game since January 25th when he got injured, one more NHL game than Aaron Dell has. So welcome back, Drake Batherson. And by the way, for anyone also wondering about the latest news out of Ottawa, which is that Jake Sanderson has signed his 3-year ELC. He's currently injured, so he's probably not going to be rushed back. He might get a game or 2 in at the end of the season. I think it was an article at The Athletic that said he had an emerging offensive game, which is true. He wasn't necessarily signed as or drafted as an offensive guy, but he seems to have developed somewhat into that this year. So he has top pair potential, probably going to start in the top 4 next year, but probably not much to look into for the rest of this season. But it is exciting that Jake Sanderson is going to help steady that Ottawa blue line. Exciting for everybody who gets excited about steady Ottawa blue lines.
Go Sens, go! By the way, speaking of the Ottawa blue line, I guess a few episodes ago we talked about how Eric Brandstrom was taking over as the top power play quarterback there. Speaking of new top power play quarterbacks available, it's kind of meh, right? Like, he's got 2 points in his last 5 games. They're both power play assists, so we were right. But it would be nice if he could do something at even strength. Maybe Batherson back will help a little bit, but the shine is definitely worn off. I wouldn't be recommending for anyone to jump on Brandstrom. Maybe like for that second week when they play 4 times, if you're really desperate. But for next week, not interesting to me yet. We're gonna have to see something. Okay, let's go to the Pittsburgh Penguins, who we started the show pointing out how they just dropped 11 goals on the Detroit Red Wings today. So there's a lot of players who did well. Evgeny Malkin was like a game time decision for this game. I had him in my IR in my Dynasty League, and I set an alarm for like 4. The game was at 5. I set an alarm for like 4:45 to like remind me to make sure to check if he's going to play or not. And like, I'm very happy I did, because it was a huge game for Malkin on his line with Rickard Rakell and Brian Rust. So interesting Penguin lines right now. People were kind of upset. Like, I remember Lewis was complaining because he's been riding Rust all season, and Rust, playing away from Crosby and Gensel was a little bit concerning. But maybe now that they have Rickard Rakell, playing with Malkin and Rakell, I don't know. Doesn't sound too bad, right? And Russ had himself a goal and 2 assists today. He's also still on the top power play, of course. So not a bad spot. Malkin, by the way, I don't think I actually completed what I was saying. He had a hat trick, yeah, and an assist. So great game for him. I mean, everyone had a great game. They scored 11 goals. Okay, the player I wanted to ask you about is Ricard Raquel, who is not on the top power play. He's a guy who I've been saying forever that I really feel confident that if Raquel was in a different situation, he could be like a big star. Like, he wasn't making me look that smart with that prediction over his first 3 games. He only had 4 shots and went pointless. But today, of course, he was able to pick up some. That would be really disappointing if he didn't even get a point today on any of the 11 goals. But no, he had a goal and 2 assists, 4 shots, only 14 minutes and 15 seconds of ice time. So, not the greatest deployment in terms of that, but you can't argue with the line mates and Malkin and Rust. So, I don't know. I'm into Ricard Raquel. If not for next week, then definitely the week after. But I don't know. I'm both into him, but also a little bit disappointed in him, if that makes sense. Like, I wanted him to be even better, but I think he's still something.
That's the Ricard Raquel story, right? I'm really into him, but I'm also really disappointed in him. That's how he's been on Anaheim for years. But the good news is that Pittsburgh has said they want him in the top 6. So I'm going to preach patience here. You probably need a little less patience after seeing what Raquel did today with those 3 points in the Detroit game. But it had been a disappointing start. And it's also a good time to remember that being in that Pittsburgh top 6 is no guarantee, right? We've seen guys get acquired and put into that Pittsburgh top 6 and do nothing. David Perron, Jason Zucker as a couple examples. So I hope Raquel is the exception here. Everything I see in his career numbers points to a top 6 skater. Raquel actually reminds me a bit of someone like Anders Lee in that his underlying numbers look great and he's had some big successes, but also some stretches of nothing at all. And also these up and down shooting percentages. Like Anders Lee for, I think, 4 to 6 seasons. I can't remember with his numbers in front of me, but he was going low shooting percentage, high shooting percentage, low, high. And it was just like, okay, well, which is the real shooting percentage that we can expect things to regress to? Whereas Raquel had a sort of similar thing, except he wasn't alternating. He just went from shooting 3 seasons in a row at 13 to 15% to shooting 7% in the following 3 seasons. This year, Raquel is back up to 10% at 5-on-5, but I'm still waiting for the real Raquel to please stand up and let us know, hey, are you a highly efficient converter or are you a below average converter? I think he should be an effective shooter. So I'm going to lean towards Raquel's true shooting percentage being up above 10%, which bodes well for the future. I'd love to see more of Raquel in prime opportunities in Pittsburgh. And I'm with you, Elon. I'm going to stay optimistic about Raquel there for now. One person, by the way, you said who didn't have a good game in Pittsburgh today. How about this? Jake Gensel, 0 shots in this game against Detroit. He had 1 assist, played only 16 minutes. Maybe he was getting a rest as things took easy. And I'm just flipping through his game log now. Yeah, he started the year with a 9-shot game. And Jake Gensel, this is the first time this season that he has gone without a single shot on goal. So sorry to anybody rostering Jake Gensel who needed a big showing from him today. He is, I guess, the Pittsburgh version of John Tavares.
Sure. But I mean, also, it's like he still got a point at least. Like, Tavares would generally, when the Leafs would have those big games, he'd do absolutely nothing. Like, if anything, the fact that you're disappointed with an assist means that he's just so amazing. But yeah, I'm sure it's score effects, right, in terms of the ice time. Like, when you're up 11-2 or whatever it was at various points in the game, you don't need to play your top line all the time. Speaking of Raquel, by the way, it's funny how you're talking about the shooting percentage and what percentage shooter he is. Like, I'm still like waiting to see if he's going to take lots of shots, because those first 3 games in Pittsburgh, he wasn't shooting much, and I'm worried about that low ice time. But yeah, once we get past the point where he's actually taking some shots, then yeah, the next thing is to see how many of them are actually going to go in. And I guess that's how hockey works. So I've just explained hockey to the listeners. I hope you
finally, after 400 episodes of the show, it's about time you explained hockey.
Yeah, first you need shots. That's step 1. Then you got to figure out how to get those shots to go in, and then you're pretty good. Then there's the whole part about like stopping the other team from taking shots, but we'll save that for lesson 2 next week. Okay, so we've got the Tampa Bay Lightning, another team that plays 10 times over the next 3 weeks. 3, 4, then 3. A late power play goal from Stamkos and an OT winner from Point helped Tampa break a 3-game losing streak with the win over Detroit on Saturday. I believe they played again today, and they won again. So look at that, losing skid over. We had someone on Twitter asking us to talk about why like Tampa has stopped winning, and there you go, 2-game winning streak. All is good in the world. They actually only took 2 or 1 shots for 4 straight games going into today's game against the Islanders, but it looks like they put up 4 against the combination of Sorokin and Varlamov, which we'll get to in a sec. It looks like Sorokin might be injured, by the way. Brian,
left after the second.
Yeah, so we'll get to the Islanders in just a sec. We're on Tampa here. Who do we want to talk about on Tampa? They're such like a team. It's like, what is there to talk about with this team? Yeah, they've got their like for a team that's like so amazing, scores so many goals. I think we've even made this point before. You've got your three superstars, Point, Kucherov, Stamkos. Then you've got all these other guys that are all kind of boring and maybe not even worth rostering. Like Killorn at one point was on a good line, but lately he's been playing like it was like Point, Kucherov, and Stamkos playing together recently, leaving everyone else to sort of fend for themselves. I guess Killorn I see scored today, but yeah, I think that Tampa is just a team where even though they're a good team, and even right now they're on a bit of a slow stretch, so maybe you can even explain why they've stopped scoring goals recently. But I think regardless, we're at a point where you just want to have these three forwards, the one defenseman in Hedman, and everyone else is kind of boring.
Yeah, well, even some of the stars have been boring lately. Like to put a face on Tampa's team-wide struggles, Nikita Kucherov has just 4 points in his last 8 games, and he had a run of where he went pointless in 4 of 5 games, which is an extreme rarity for him. I didn't comb through his game logs to see if or when that's ever happened since he broke out, but I'm guessing it hasn't. And Tampa is a team. They've been held to just 1 or 2 goals only in 7 of their last 8 games. For comparison, Tampa had been held to 1 or 2 goals or 0 only 15 times in 56 games before this stretch. And now 7 of their last 8. So basically, Tampa would score 3 or more goals in 4 or 5 games, and then the fourth or fifth they'd score just 1 or 2. So what's going on here? Well, the team is shooting 6% at all situations, 4% at 5-on-5. And honestly, I think that's all there is to explain what's going on in Tampa. I compared their other team, like their team-wide offensive numbers, and their expected goals rates have actually been higher in this stretch where they're not scoring goals than the rest of the season before it. But the rest of the season before this, Tampa was shooting 10% at 5-on-5, second in the league, even though their expected goals are actually outside the top 10 and more mid-pack than high-end. So, maybe Tampa isn't a top offensive team in the league, but they're at least a mid-pack, for sure top third, I would say. And this has just been a little bit of an outage. So I'm not going to give up on any Tampa player we'd normally expect to contribute. I guess you're talking about guys like Killorn and Cirelli and Sergachev. I would say if they've been good enough to help you in the past, I think chances are the same as usual. They'll help you in your next game. I know Tampa has been quiet lately. I think it's just a shooting percentage blip. I think they'll be fine. You may be able, if you want, to stream out those extra Tampa guys until Friday and just add them back to your team when their schedule looks up again because of the lack of offense. Maybe no one else will run for them. That's a risk. It's up to you to take depending on the way your league functions. But I am not changing my thinking on Tampa the rest of the season. They are still a very good offensive team who are just having a hard time putting pucks in the net, even though they're doing nothing worse than they ever do.
Yeah, I hear you. And the lines could obviously change at any time, but they have won 2 in a row now, playing Stamkos, Kucherov, and Point together on one line. I kind of feel like if they do that, just to me, like, I don't really care what like Killorn was doing earlier in the year because he was doing that playing with like one of Stamkos or Point, So it's like if Killorn is playing on a line with Palat and Cirelli, it's just like that's not, but he's still on the top power play. So yeah, he can maybe do something, but he's a lot less interesting to me now that they're loading up the top line for however long that lasts. Let's go to Detroit now, the team that was on the other side of this, destruction against the Penguins. They play also 10 times the next 3 weeks, but now we're on to teams that play 3, 3, and then 4 games. So maybe you're less interested in these teams because you don't want to just bank on making it to the finals, right? You still got to get through the next 2 weeks. And I hate to say this, Brian, you were talking about some players on Tampa that you don't want to say that they are like people you have to be less excited about yet. Here's a player that I really don't want to tell people to be less excited about because I love this player, but it's my job as a journalist for Brelan Entertainment and keeping Karlsson. Moritz Seider is on a cold streak all of a sudden. Only 1 assist in his last 10 games played. That was going into today, and I see he didn't get a point today. So that means only 1 point in 11 games for Moritz Seider. Such rough timing, right? Going cold right before the fantasy playoffs, and the Wings only play 3 times in each of the next 2 weeks. He's still been solid for shots and blocks, so he's giving decent peripherals. But, like, where has this offense gone? And, Brian, do you think this cold streak is sustainable or fleeting? Like, I don't want to recommend for people to drop Moritz Seider for like Sean Dursey or Vince Dunn, but I'm looking at the numbers and right now there's no offense for Seider. Don't make me do it. Please tell me a reason why people should still expect Seider to bounce back.
Sorry, I totally missed this in my prep, so I'm just scrambling.
Oh, you also missed, I think you missed it. You missed my Brelan Entertainment drop.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've just been preoccupied with Seider. I'm just gonna say he's fine. He's fine.
Oh, I mean, he has 1 point in 11 games.
Yeah.
So you might have to say why, I guess.
Yeah. All right, 1 point in 11 games for Moritz Seider, and he's still shooting plenty. So I'm actually not that concerned. He's still also seeing tons of minutes, as many as 28 against the Islanders a few days ago, and still throwing hits, still blocking shots. Maybe this is an easy explanation is always it's the rookie wall that he's falling off. But on the whole, Seider's still pacing for 52 points on the season. And I'm not down on him at all. Like, this might be, Elon, a bit of a Devon Taves situation where, he might have been overperforming by a bit. And sure, he's colder than we should expect him to be the rest of the season now. But maybe this is just sort of some of the early luck evening out a little bit. Not that we said on the show that Seider has been extremely lucky, because a couple weeks ago, I think we gave him some props for the amazing season he's having, and saying, without knowing what his career baselines are, we think a lot of it he can keep up. And I do think he can keep up a 55 point pace the rest of the way. So don't get too down. It's unfortunately he's gone so silent, as silent as he's been really since there was a cold stretch in November where he wasn't doing much. I'm hoping this is just the same deal. Needs a little rest, but is playing tons of minutes. I guess the worst case is that Seider has just been run into the ground. He's tired. He's just about done. His body's giving in on him, and he'll work on his conditioning in the offseason, and he won't be as effective the rest of the way. But I'm going to stay optimistic as long as the shots are coming, because he's taken at least 2 shots in his last 7 games. And that's a great sign for a defenseman, including 4 shots against Pittsburgh today.
Yeah, I am with you. I'm happy that was your answer. You didn't convince me otherwise. I think if anything, if Seider is going to get dropped in leagues because of this cold stretch, I think he could be potentially a really sneaky and nice ad for the rest of the year. We have a question in the chat here from Ashton asking about thoughts on Dursey for the rest of the season. Go back. Oh, we talked about him, and I'm into him. So I won't put that in the show, actually. That's for the YouTube.
Go back. Yeah, don't just go back. Well, go back, but we like him. We actually didn't say a whole lot about him.
I did. I don't know. Yeah, he's on the top power play, and I said LA's scoring goals again. So it's like all the good recipes for like someone who can do well. Brian, Seider or Dursey, just as a YouTube exclusive? I'd go Seider.
Seider for sure. Like for me, it's not close. Also,
okay,
K Towney is mentioning Justin Barron. K Towney, was it you who mentioned Justin Barron in the chat earlier?
Yeah, why do we care about Justin Barron?
He's
Is this like the next Max? What was the guy, Max Wilson or something on Anaheim that we were talking about?
Max Jones.
Max Jones.
Justin Barron. I'm just trying to see. He's a defenseman. I don't know.
In Montreal.
He didn't play on the power play tonight. He played 15 minutes and took 2 shots. But K Towney liked what he saw, and he saw a lot of action in 3-on-3. Okay. He's played 3 career games.
All right. Well, we're on Montreal now. I wasn't planning on talking about Justin Barron.
I don't. I mean,
but maybe in the future.
I'll make passing reference to him.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Let's get back on track. But thanks, everyone. Like, I really appreciate all these comments in the chat. It really makes the show so much more fun. Even if I'm like, Justin Barron, who's that? Okay. Next up, Brian, we got a couple more 3-3-4 teams to go before we'll get to the teams with the very best schedules to end this podcast. But yeah, let's go to Montreal next. Looks like Jeff Petrie is going to be out a while with a lower body injury, which is too bad. He had turned his season around, gotten to a point of being like quote unquote rosterable, at least in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Pager Fantasy League, something you definitely could not say about him for the first 2/3 of the season. So obviously he didn't bounce back to what he was doing last year, but it was nice for him to actually be someone that you're interested in having on your fantasy team. But he's out indefinitely, so we guess we just forget about him for now. With Petrie out, it looks like Chris Weidman continues to get top power play deployment for the Habs. He's actually had this job for a while. We never really talked about him because he wasn't doing much with it, but he actually has 8 assists in his last 10 games, at least going into today. And 7 of those 8 assists were on the power play. Oh, wow. He has another point today, actually. So make that 9. And again, not on the power play. Wow. So a rare thing for Chris Weidman to get an even strength point. The player that I actually considered him as a comparison is like Will Butcher back when he was getting all those power play points on New Jersey, and that was basically all he would do is either be a power play assist, not even point, right? Power play assist or nothing, and that seems to be what Chris Weidman is. But if you want points, it seems like he's a pretty decent bet to get you a point. Maybe, I don't know, 3 points every 5 games, maybe 3 points every 6 games at least, while he's holding this playoffs power play spot, which he's been doing lately. I'm not really interested in him at all. I'm assuming you're not going to tell people to drop cider for Chris Weidman, but I had to bring him up, right?
You had to bring him up because we had to talk about someone on Montreal. Weidman's like the poster boy for on the top power play, and still not worth adding this year. So it's interesting. He's finally doing something. So good for him. We also had K Towney, a regular in our live chat, mentioned that Justin Barron, who's the piece that the Habs acquired in the Arturi Lehkonen trade with Colorado, is playing his first game with Montreal tonight and is actually looking pretty good. It looks like he got a few 3-on-3 overtime shifts, 15 minutes of ice, 2 shots on goal. 20 years old. I was looking up where he's at in like prospect rankings. Dauber has him as his 28th prospect defenseman on the top 50 list. So high end former first round pick of the Avs, Justin Barron, looking good early in Montreal. So maybe keep an eye on him. I don't know. Maybe he's more interesting than Chris Weidman, who is barely interesting. But yeah, also, why don't we just mention Caulfield and Suzuki? Caulfield going into today, 24 points in 20 games. Suzuki, 22 points in 20 games. And honestly, both look for real. Like at once burned, twice shy, right? We all went heavy on Caulfield and Suzuki and Toffoli going into the season. It didn't happen. But I feel like, you're talking about Batherson. Could we get him late? I think you have a better chance of sneaking value on Caulfield and Suzuki later than they deserve to be drafted because they've already let everyone down once than you would Batherson. I think there might be a market inefficiency here. So take note about Caulfield and Suzuki. I'm not disbelieving any of what they've done since Marty St. Louis. That's why I picked the 20 game sample. That's since he came on board. They're both above a point per game and they look real. They really do.
Wow, yeah. So draft 6 are going to be fast. Obviously I'm excited about the fantasy playoffs coming up, and I hope I'm going to win all 3 of my leagues. But I'm also already excited for draft season and to start figuring out our projections for some of these new players. And yeah, it looks like Caulfield and Suzuki, if they could continue what they've been doing with Martin St. Louis, they could be point per game players next year, which would make them potentially good value in drafts if many people aren't ready to believe it. Okay, Philly, Brassard is gone. Konechny was hurt. He came back today. I don't know. It's going to be a painful end to the season for these guys. There's some new player named Hayden Hodgson who had a goal and an assist in his NHL debut on Thursday. He was playing with Hayes and Lindblom. We've talked about Philly a lot, so there aren't too many new players to talk about. So I figured I'd just ask you who. Well, let me see what he did because Philly played again today against Nashville. They lost 5-4. What did Hayden Hodgson do? No points. All right, so don't even talk about
Double
him.
H.
12 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy's undrafted, 26 years old. I know you said don't talk about him, but I did the research, so let me cash in on it. Windsor native of Windsor, Ontario. He played in the OHL, but never had one really great offensive season. Oh yeah, this is the OHL guy I was talking about before. He had one great offensive season in the OHL was when he was an overager. So it doesn't even really count as being a good offensive season because you're basically a big guy beating up on all the noobs in the OHL. In 2017-18, Hodgson played his first pro season. He played in the AHL 6 points in 41 games, and then he played in the ECHL until this year. He played with 6 different ECHL clubs over 4 years. This guy's the definition of a journeyman. Nice that he's getting a cup of coffee in the NHL, but I don't expect we'll see him ever again in the NHL beyond this cup. So Hayden Hodgson, congratulations. You've beaten a lot of odds to get here, and I hope you have a long and wonderful stay in the NHL, but I'm not counting on it.
Okay, fair enough. And I'm not counting on us talking about Philly many more times for the rest of this year. There's not too much fantasy value to be gleaned here at this point that people don't already know about, at least. Let's go to the Sharks. They also go 3-3-4 for the next 3 weeks. Another hat trick for Timo Meier on Saturday, though it was against the Ducks, so don't be too impressed, but still another great game from Meier. This is with Logan Couture out with an upper body injury, by the way. He's apparently just day-to-day. Could be back as soon as next Wednesday. But for those looking for streamers, Alexander Barabanov is hot once again. A goal and 5 assists in his last 5 games, playing with Meier and Hurdle on the top line, and also he's taken Couture's spot on the top power play. So I feel like if Barabanov is still around come Wednesday morning, even if Couture comes back, I still think he's actually quite interesting if he's going to stick playing with Meier and Hurdle, Meier and Hurdle, which seems likely. So I definitely, we talked about before some guys at the beginning of the show, your Dodonovs. I definitely think that Barabanov is in the same conversation and maybe even more interesting depending on the schedule.
Agree. Yeah, I will also take Barabanov over that other pile because he's had better runs for most of the year than those other guys. So yes, I am with you, Elon.
Okay, and then looking in net, James Reimer continues to crush it since returning from his injury, while Kaapo Kähkönen led in 4 goals in the Sharks' debut versus Edmonton on Thursday. They have fair. It was against Edmonton. They're a tough team to play against. But technically, the Sharks are still in the wild card hunt. I just checked. They're 10 points back with 17 games to go, 3 in hand over Vegas, who currently holds the spot, or at least that was going into today. So I wonder if the Sharks, like, on one hand, it might be nice to see what they have in Kähkönen. They just traded for him. But on the other, while they're still in playoff contention, before they're eliminated, I kind of think they're going to go with the hot hand. So I don't know. I thought at first when I saw that they acquired Kähkönen that this is bad news for Reimer and he's going to play less, but I'm not sure because Reimer just keeps playing really well.
Yeah, this is not just the matter of going with the hot hand in James Reimer over Kaapo Kähkönen. It's going with the better goalie. And I think the Sharks, they've been through enough goaltending trauma to feel like, hey, we have a chance to take a shot on a guy here. We might as well. So I like that they're taking a chance on Kähkönen. But as we've mentioned countless times on the show, Kähkönen has not shown the goods yet. There's been sneak peeks of potential, but nothing so convincing yet. And this season, he has not been good. So that's reason to keep giving James Reimer starts.
Yeah, so Reimer, if he's somehow out there for you in free agency, I think he could have a good run, and he's looked really good lately. Well, actually, pretty much all season. All right, let's go to the Jets now, another 3-3-4 team, the last one we're going to talk about. Josh Morrissey, up to 4 goals and 1 assist in his last 6 games going into today, and he had 21 shots in that span with hits and blocks to boot. So, man, anyone who grabbed Morrissey back when we recommended him like a month or two ago when he was like available in a lot of leagues, hopefully you're sending us a gift basket. Message me, and I'll tell you our address that you could send that to. Brian, yeah. I see you have your hand up.
I just want to add, are you surprised that Morrissey has been? I'm surprised that Morrissey has been this good for this long.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, he's never really had a run like this. Like, we saw that he was on the top power play. I remember thinking at the time, well, okay, he's on the top power play now. You probably want him. And yeah, today he didn't get a point. Karel Vejmelka is hard to score against, as we've discussed. The Jets won 2-1 in overtime. Vejmelka, 38 saves. So that's what we're talking about, right? You're going to get a lot of saves from him. But back to the Jets. So yeah, Morrissey didn't get a point, but he still was +2. So he was clearly involved with the offense. 3 shots, 2 hits. He's really good.
He's just filling up peripherals even better than he ever really has. And if you look at the game logs, he sort of had a nice week in mid-February and then was mostly cold until he's had a nice week and a bit since mid-March. So he hasn't been great straight through, but he's held on to this top power play production. He's putting up 3 or more shots a game often, add in some hits and blocks. And this is the most fantasy relevant he's ever been. And like I said, I'm a little surprised, but it's great to see.
Yeah, it's great for the Jets. Also, because as we've discussed, Neil Pionk has been a little bit of a disappointment. So it's nice that they're, whatever they've lost in Pionk's value, they've gained in Morrissey, and it all evens out maybe.
Pionk is not I feel like we talked a lot about Pionk going cold, and he's been okay.
Yeah, he's okay.
He's actually cold again. He has one point in his last, I think it's 6 or 7 games. But before that, he had a nice little 10-game stretch where he looked to be himself. But a lot of ups and downs on this Winnipeg blue line this year.
Yeah, right now, obviously, Morrissey is the clear guy you want over Pionk. It's not even close. But yeah, there's still a chance that Pionk could get you a point every now and then, for sure. Okay, let's go to Nashville now. The final 10-game team over the next 3 weeks, though it comes in the form of 2 games next week and then 4 and 4 in the final 2 weeks. So this is potentially a great opportunity for anyone who has earned a bye, or maybe at some point you'll realize that you have your matchup next week well in hand. Potentially some teams that are desperate may have to drop some Predators, and that'll be your opportunity to grab them for those great final 2 weeks. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly who you might be able to get. I think probably the best potential free agents. I don't think Duchesne or Forsberg or Roman Josi. Obviously, those 3 aren't getting dropped. So we're probably looking at Ryan Johansson and Mikael Granlund that might end up becoming available to you. And I don't know, they haven't been especially exciting lately. Granlund got back on the top line for a bit, but I see today he was back on the second line and Johansson was on the top line. Maybe the one player that you should be the most interested in is Tanner Jeannot, especially in your league with hits. He just had a new baby, by the way, but he came back today. And I know that we always joke around that players who just had a baby, we think they're gonna fall off, but I think that's more if they've had to take care of the baby for a long time over the summer,
instantly after the baby. It's within the first year or 2 years when you're if you're trying to pair parenthood with playing, which he hasn't had to do yet.
Yeah, so he just has a few more weeks to go in the regular season. So hopefully he could keep this up. He came back to play today against Philly, and he scored the overtime winning goal to go along with the 2 assists he picked up. So this guy just continues to have this fantastic rookie season. I was able to grab him in free agency in tier 1 of the Cupful just a couple days ago. I thought I had my lineup set, and I was happy with it. But then I noticed Matt Boldy was there really struggling, and Ben and I talked about Boldy, and we'll get to him soon because we haven't gotten to Minnesota yet. And I saw Jeannot dropped. Plus, he was even like IR eligible because Yahoo was kind enough to give him the O because he missed a game because he went to go witness the birth of his baby. And so, I grabbed him, and I'm excited for him, right? Because I actually am lucky enough to have a bye. So I'm just going to get these final 2 weeks of 4 games and 4 games. And this guy is having such a great rookie season. He's up to now 22 goals in 65 games. Brian, do you think he's going to get up to 25? Think he's going to get up to 30? And by the way, a fun fact, I was just looking through Jeannot's game log before you answer that question. He's only had 1 game this year where he scored more goals than he had hits. That was on October 24th, where he had a goal and no hits, which is very rare. He throws the body around a lot, which is especially impressive, right? Like we're talking like Ovechkin, maybe like Tom Wilson, but not even for a player who scores so many goals and throws so many hits, right?
I mean, I don't know. Like usually you have 0 or 1 goals in a game. Sometimes you have 2. Rarely you have 3. And like, so this means, is a consistent hitter. And that's great. I'd actually be more interested to see, Elon, if you're willing to do the legwork, how many times Jeannot has taken more shots than hits.
Okay, fair enough. I guess the thing that I was saying that it's impressive is just the fact that he has like 20 plus goals and throws so many hits. Like, forget about the game log thing. Okay. I think that's rare.
Sure. Okay, yeah. It's rare to find somebody who hits as often as he does while scoring as much as he does. And as you know, is like 21 goals coming into tonight. Really impressive considering he averages, like middle 6 minutes. He has like a PK role, which is where he picks up a bunch of minutes. And he's seeing just about 12 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time per night. He is shooting 20% on the season, which is probably high. And is like, you're asking if you could get to 25, 30 goals. I think you get up to 25. I think all things normal with no weird variability happening, Jeannot is the sort of guy who could get you a goal like every 3 or 4 games because he only takes 1.5 shots per game on average. So that's 105 shots this year for Jeannot, 231 hits. So there's a ratio for you to consider as well. It's great. 22 goals in 65 games. I would expect 25 goals. I wouldn't expect 30. But I'm open to him getting on a run and getting, landing somewhere between 25 and 30. A great season, a great guy to have. I don't know. I think he's going to be overvalued next year, if you're asking me, which I don't think you have. But the rest of the season, I think he's a fun guy to take a swing on as a guy who's hitting a lot, especially if there's value for that. Just don't count on a lot of shots. And we don't know yet if he can keep up a 20% shooting percentage.
Yeah, I think I'm with you in terms of like it's really hard to predict these players who like the majority of their value comes from goals because goals are rare and a player could easily just go cold, especially if they don't shoot very often. So I think the upside for next year would be if he could ever earn his way into the top 6, which, he's just a rookie, right? So maybe with more experience, he can get that extra job. Though obviously it's working out well for Nashville having him where he is right now. All right, now to the teams with really amazing schedules. For those of you who have listened to an hour and 50 minutes, however long this podcast has been, now you get the players who even if you don't like the player, you might still want to add him just because the team is going to play a lot. Carolina plays 11 times over the next 3 weeks, 4 games next week, 4 games the following week, 3 games in the finals. I don't know how many people have noticed, but Antti Raanta is putting together a really fantastic season, eh? Like his win versus St. Louis yesterday was his 5th quality start in a row. He's up to a .919 save percentage in the 20 games he's played. He hasn't gotten injured very much, which was generally the concern with Raanta. Going into next week, Carolina plays Monday, Tuesday, and Tuesday is versus Tampa. So on one hand, you might think, I don't think I want Raanta versus Tampa. But as we've discussed, Tampa's not even scoring that many goals lately. So I'm going to just throw it out there right now and say that I think this is a spot start you may want to consider right away. And then Carolina's going to play 4 games the next week, so he might even, give you another couple of games. So Raanta is, I think, a really good goalie to potentially stream. And then other potential Monday, Tuesday streams, maybe you could look at like Seth Jarvis, who scored on Saturday from the top line with Aho and Teravainen. No guarantee he'll stay there. Martin Necas has been a huge disappointment this year, but lately he's been playing on the second line with Trocheck and Svechnikov, and he had a good game recently. So those are 2 boring options. We've already talked about all these guys. I don't really have a question for you. Just wanted to throw out some names about Carolina that people could consider because of this good early week schedule.
Yeah, and Antti Ranta is the one maybe I'll focus on, which we shouldn't talk too loudly about the season he's putting together. Find wood and touch it ASAP. If Ranta misses any time from here on out, it's maybe it's on us, Elon. But his career is putting up a career high season going by Ranta's performance above his expected save percentage. And by the way, we've mentioned this before, but to repeat it again, Antti Ranta has always been good. Like, career history shows that he could be a top 10 goalie in the league year in, year out if his time on ice wasn't limited by repeated injuries that knock him out of action for a long time. Ranta turns 33 this May. It'd be nice for him to get another 2 or 3 years of playing and staying healthy, to have some measure of the career his plays deserved, because Antti Ranta is a really good goalie. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So let's hope this is the start of something good. Letang, we saw the injury prone for so long, and touch wood again, he's holding on. He's played a lot of games the last little while. So let's hope Ranta can find the same in his mid-30s.
Okay, let's go to another goalie now over in Dallas, who also plays 11 games, and they're also 4 games, and then 3 games. So don't even worry about the finals. Let's get there with these great 4-game weeks coming up. Scott Wedgwood has been doing pretty well lately, and I think if he is announced to get either of the Tuesday or Thursday games versus Anaheim, I'd recommend grabbing him, because a game versus Anaheim is good. And then Dallas plays 2 games next weekend versus San Jose and then Seattle. So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, right? So I'm saying if you see a notification on, let's say, Tuesday that Wedgwood is playing, that means you're going to get 2 games that week against all teams. He'd probably get Seattle, right? He'd probably get the Sunday game. So you got Anaheim and Seattle. Those are 2 good spot starts. And Wedgwood had a really good game recently. He had 43 plus saves actually in each of his last 3 games, including his first game as a star versus Carolina. Sorry. Versus Carolina. I know Ettinger is a starter. I'm not saying that like Wedgwood is going to challenge for that. I'm saying like he's good for a spot start when you could potentially get 2 games in a week. But it is worth noting Ettinger has been struggling a bit lately. I wouldn't be surprised if Wedgwood gets 2 games next week and maybe 2 games the following week. And by the way, he's only 29 years old. So I wonder if he is currently got a lot to play for, right? He's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. So, I mean, I'd assume every goalie in the NHL, I'd hope, is trying their best. But Wedgwood has a lot to play for. And so I think it's going to be really exciting to see what he could do down the stretch now playing for the Dallas Stars. And yeah, Brian, here's a question for you. There's 2 goalies this year in the NHL that are really shocking to me that they're playing as well as they have been and are actually even regulars in the league. Those are Scott Wedgwood and Anton Forsberg. Who's surprising you more at this point between the 2?
The numbers say I should be more surprised by Forsberg, but I find myself a little more surprised by Wedgwood. And the numbers that I'm quoting, well, Forsberg, over the course of his career, 90 games, he's had a 5-on-5 save percentage that sits at .912 since 2014. And Forsberg was a 7th rounder very late in the draft, 188th overall back in 2011. Meanwhile, Scott Wedgwood has done better than Forsberg at 5-on-5 with a .917 save percentage in 70 career games played since 2015. And Wedgwood was a 3rd round pick, 84th overall back in 2010. So here these guys finally getting a run where they're shining. Wedgwood had this huge start to his career where he played 3 games at age 23 in March of 2015, so 7 years ago now, and he was phenomenal then, but he didn't play again. I think there was an injury. He didn't play again until 2017, where he started well and fell off, and hasn't seen this kind of consistent action since then. So it's great that Wedgwood is doing well. His career numbers are actually decent. He's played in line with his expected save percentage mark through his career, so there's a chance that this guy could be at least a timeshare starter as his next step. And I'm curious to see what he can do the rest of the season. There's lots of pucks to stop in Dallas, apparently, and there were lots in Arizona. Maybe this is a guy who thrives on volume. And so if you're asking me who I'm most surprised by, Elon, I think Forsberg is the most surprising one, just because he's had the worst career to date and was a later round draft pick, but who has the potential to continue surprising and actually work his way into a starter's role at some point in the next couple of years. I'll go Scott Wedgwood.
Yeah. Well, also Forsberg signed that contract, right? They're both interesting to me. I'm happy for both of them. It must be weird to spend your whole life fighting to get into the league, then like it doesn't go the way you hoped it would, and then like somehow you're able to keep plugging away in the minors or whatever, and then eventually get in. And now a prominent player on a team, obviously Wedgwood, maybe potentially more prominent if Dallas actually gets into the playoffs and he gets to help them. But they've got a ways to go to get there. Okay, let's go now to the Minnesota Wild, who also play 11 times in the next 3 weeks, 4 games, then 3 games, then 4 games. We have to talk about Matt Boldy. Ben brought him up on short shifts on Thursday. I was like, yeah, he's cold. Like, I still feel like he's good. He's still playing with Fiala. It's a bummer that he's off the top power play, but like, we saw what he did before. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Another pointless game for him on Saturday. Another pointless game for him today. So we're looking at like 1 point in what? Like his last 10, 11? Like, Matt Boldy is super cold. His ice time is low. I think we're approaching snoozer territory, right? Like, I think he's probably going to have a great career. And I know I said on short shifts that I would still hold on, but then I went back on it and I tweeted about it. I wanted to be honest with people. Like, I didn't want people to think that I wasn't following what I said. But yeah, I looked into it. I ended up dropping him for Tanner Jeannot, which I'm fine with right now. And, today is another example of why I did it, right? Because Jeannot got himself 3 points and Boldy another quiet game. Really disappointing because he was looking like an ad of the season, just a couple weeks ago.
He was. This has been a fall from grace after a skyrocket to must roster. Boldy's pointless in 5 going into today. Only 6 shots combined in those 5 games. His time on ice down to line 3 minutes, playing only 12 or 13 minutes a night. So this is not a great place for Boldy to be. It's hard to endorse him. I believe he could blow up again anytime, but he is a snoozer for the moment, which is a guy who you have on your roster because you think he's doing well and you don't need to keep close tabs on him, but actually you do. By the way, Kevin Fiala still humming along. Freddie Gadreau still hit or miss. But Boldy is not presently a must roster during the fantasy playoffs. And I think he still could be at some point, more so than Gadreau. Who would you rather have, actually, Elon? Freddie Gadreau or Matt Boldy?
I don't know. Probably
You're
Boldy.
bored by both of them.
Yeah, someone who's doing more. I'd rather Fiala if you could have him.
Well, yeah, of course. We'd all rather Fiala.
We'd all rather have some more Fiala in our lives. Okay. Next up, let's go to the Islanders. 4 games and 3 games and 4 games coming up. Nothing's really changed since we covered them last. Anders Lee and Brock Nelson are still red hot lately. They've even been bringing their lineman Anthony Beauvillier with them for a couple good games recently. Today, we already discussed how the Islanders lost 4-1 to Tampa Bay today. Let's see who got that goal. Brock Nelson. There you go. So he continues to just have this amazing second half of the year. Anders Lee didn't get the assist. So rude. But he did have 5 shots. So he made up for it with the quantity there. Meanwhile, Matt Barzal continues to play on a line with Parise and Wahlstrom, or maybe today it changed. I guess I could give you the update, but the main story here is that Matt Barzal is becoming kind of boring. He's not like at Matt Boldy territory, but he's starting to approach it in terms of someone you're expecting to do something for you, and he continues to be quiet. So yeah, today's game, Barzal played on a line with Wahlstrom and Parise, which aren't great line mates. Like maybe one day Wahlstrom will be great, and at one point in the past Parise was great, but currently I'm not too excited about Wahlstrom or Parise. Now, with this pointless game today, I'm counting just 2 assists in Barzal's last 5 games. No shots today also, I think. Oh, man, Brian, I'm getting concerned here. Would it be too crazy to start recommending? Like, at least we're talking about the Islanders here at the point of the show where we're at teams with good schedules. So if you're going to be patient with someone, you're probably going to want to do that with Matt Barzal because he's been a superstar in the league for a while. But not great. Yeah, no shots today. Only 14 minutes and 58 seconds of ice time. It's not good.
Yeah, that is a trend, by the way. Matt Barzal's low ice time. Remember, he missed 6 games not long ago. Since returning, now 5 points in 10 games. And coming into today, he's probably averaging closer to 16 minutes now versus the 18 and a half minutes before he was injured. That's a 2.5 minute difference in average ice time. So maybe Barzal is still a little ginger here. He's still shooting for the most part, still taking faceoffs, but I wonder if he's not at 100%. It's crazy. What's crazy is that the Isles are basically eliminated from the playoffs. And I wonder if that has anything to do with this and Barzal playing less. The Isles are the only team out of the playoff picture with a goal differential close to 0. Coming into today, the Isles were at a -1 goal differential. Every other team out of the playoffs picture in the East is between a -30 and -77 goal differential. So it's been a rough year for the Isles, just not getting what they deserve necessarily, but also having just also kind of getting what they deserve. But this is less reason to push Barzal. I'd be a little concerned if I rostered him, but I don't think I'm about to drop him. I think you have to be patient. Although a couple more games, if he's playing 14 to 16 minutes and there are better options producing and you're in dire straits, like he might fall into the Besser category where he's someone who's hard to drop because you think he should be doing better. But if he's not, at some point, you got to pull the plug.
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember when we first started talking about Barzal's cold streak, and we were like, "Oh, and his line mates aren't that great. He's like now on what looks like the third line with Parisi and Wallstrom." We're like, "Well, no, but that's not the third line. Barzal's line is the top line, but now like the deployment is looking like third or definitely not top line deployment. That's Brock Nelson and Anders Lee territory." So really weird. I hope you're right, and it's an injury. Not that I want him to be injured, but I just want to have a good excuse and not to have to try to explain why he's all of a sudden fell off. Let's go now to the Toronto Maple Leafs, who play 3 times next week and then 4 times in the following 2 weeks. Mark Giordano has yet to point with his new team. He's been putting up the periffs like crazy. 3 hits and 2 blocks versus New Jersey, 5 blocks versus Montreal. I see he had another 5 blocks today to go along with 3 hits, so that's great, but no shots. This guy's not shooting at all with the Leafs. So that's actually kind of concerning. I think I'd rather the fewer hits and blocks, but at least some shots on goal and the potential for points that he was putting up in Seattle. So I'm not sure at this point whether I have him in the cupful. I'm not sure if I'm going to hold on or not. I still haven't decided. By the way, big opportunity for Petr Mrazek today because he got waived. We saw that. Then he ended up coming back to the Leafs, I guess because Harry Sateri ended up going to Arizona. So the Leafs ended up bringing him back to the main roster after he cleared waivers. And he had a 3-2 win over the Devils on Wednesday. And I see he had a nice win today over Florida. So I don't know. All of a sudden, maybe this was like a wake-up call from Mrazek, and maybe he is someone that you want to take a shot on again. I'd still be a little nervous, but
I think you have to take a shot on Petr Mrazek, especially like he just beat Florida. I think I saw this is Florida's like second regulation loss to a divisional opponent all season long or something like that. Someone needs to check that. It was just a tweet I saw in passing during the show, so I might have gotten some part of it wrong. But Petr Mrazek, you got to go. If he was dropped, I actually tried to get him today and I had some roster issues that made it not possible for me, unfortunately. But if he's sitting in free agency, you go get him right now because Eric Shalgren did stumble a little as we might have expected and Sateri isn't coming. So Mrazek has probably got to be the guy. And it would be weird if he needed to be waived and his career like basically threatened for him to find the focus and drive to succeed. But hey, maybe that's just another chip on his shoulder to motivate him. So you got to go ahead and get Mrazek for as long as Campbell is out. Like, how can you not at this point? Maybe he'll be a drop, but you have to try him.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying. I'm just nervous, right? Because like we're at the point now where if he blows up, that could like hurt you, and he doesn't strike me as someone like I'm a little more nervous than him than like Velmelka maybe at this point. But maybe that's more me and not a Mrazek thing. Like, yeah, definitely there's a high upside here, right? The Leafs are a good team. If he's going to be their starter until Campbell comes back, there is word that Campbell is like starting to progress. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I can't disagree with you that Mrazek is someone you have to probably go for. But I'm just saying I'm nervous.
Of course, that's what Mrazek has done to us.
Yeah, he's traumatized me too much. Okay, 2 more teams to go. Buffalo plays 12 times and St. Louis plays 12 times. That's talking 4-4-4, the best you can get. Over in Buffalo, I think we've got ourselves a killer playoff fantasy ad here. This is the perfect recipe. You got a team with the best possible schedule over the next 3 weeks with only one line that produces. It doesn't produce all the time, but it's one line that produces at least somewhat consistently. And there's one member of that line that has mysteriously gone cold, which maybe has led to him getting dropped in some leagues. I'm talking about Alex Tuch and his 1 goal and 2 assists over his last 10 games. I'm seeing that Buffalo played today against, we talked about this earlier in the show, right? Against the Rangers, where Vetrano and Kopp got all those points. What did Alex Tuch do? No points. I'm surprised. Like, so I guess you'll answer if like this cold streak is super sustainable, but he's still top line. He's still top power play. But he's now only rostered in, like fewer than 25% of leagues. So with this great playoff schedule and this great deployment, I think he's someone I take a shot on, even though he's cold.
Yeah, you got to go get Alex Tuch if he's out there in your league. This is a top line player who emerged that way pretty much immediately once he got his opportunity after never having gotten it in Vegas, which we talked about often. Like, he could have top line potential, but he's never had the shot. Now he is, and he's taking advantage. Yes, Alex Tuch is cold, but that's because going into today, he was only getting in on a quarter of the goals scored at 5-on-5 over this cold stretch. And that's like, he's probably going to more likely be in on 3/4. That's a stat that will regress to a higher number. Also, Buffalo's shooting only 7% with him on the ice. There are fewer goals for him to assist on. And Tuck himself has no goals on 20 shots in this run, when I think normally you'd have a couple there. So yeah, if you have him, hold him. And if he's been dropped by someone impatient, Buffalo has this great playoff schedule, and Alex Tuck is their best player. Well, I guess Tage Thompson is actually making a case too. He's been amazing also. So there's a couple great value guys on Buffalo, but I imagine Tuck is the one more likely to be available to you, in which case you should jump on him.
Yeah, like Skinner and Thompson, also great. I just don't think they're available. Tuck someone, yeah, who might be, and I agree with you. And it's even good to hear that you're giving all these, bad luck reasons. He's on the ice when the team is scoring. He just happens to not be getting an assist. Bad shooting luck. It's all this is what we do with Kevin Karlsson. We find these gems. It's easy for us to tell you to grab someone who's scoring a lot of points. Take our advice. I'm pretty confident that Alex Tuck is going to be good for you, especially even if he's still a little cold. If he only gets 2 points, that's probably still better than what you'll get out of someone who only plays 3 times, right, in a week. Because anyways, you got what I'm saying. All right, the other team is the St. Louis Blues, who plays 4-4-4. I think we know the book on the Blues at this point. On Thursday, Ben and I talked about Perron running hot. On Saturday was the Buchnevich and Thomas line that both had, that did well, and both of those guys had multi-point games in the 6-3 loss to the Isles. To me, this is how the Blues work. It's obvious. If you have any of like O'Reilly, Perron, Shen, Kyrou, Tarasenko, Buchnevich, Thomas, and if they have a 4-game week, like they have each of the next 3 weeks, you're going to get like probably 2 good games, maybe more. But like if they have a couple bad games, like if Rob Thomas goes pointless in the first 2 games of the week, I don't even ask. Like, I'm telling you that my advice will be to still hold on, because it's very likely he'll then have 2 multi-point games to end the week. So that's my book on the Blues at this point. They like spread the offense around, so they're not always all hot every game, but it doesn't take long for one of these lines to do something. So you can let me know if you disagree. I don't really have much else to talk about the Blues. Like, Brian, I assume you're not going to recommend Nick Leddy with Krug out. I don't want to recommend Nick Leddy.
No, I mean, sure. If you need to take a desperation shot, the Blues are playing often enough that maybe Nick Leddy hits on the right time for you. But I'm not recommending him. In fact, I'll name another guy who you haven't mentioned, Brandon Saad, as someone who's been very hit or miss all year. Perfect illustration of this. Last 20 games, he's pointed in 9 of them, and he's averaging half a point per game in that stretch, which is basically his season. So you can try with Brandon Saad. I think there are lots of streamers who don't have that 50% hit rate that Brandon Saad has. Otherwise, it's a cardio shift for him. Sometimes he has, he does absolutely nothing across the board. Sometimes he has multi-point nights. So Brandon Saad is the definition of a dice roll stream, really. And if you're looking that deep in your free agent pool, maybe in each of these 4-game weeks, he points twice, which could be worthwhile to you depending on your format. So I'll just add him to your watch list as someone to potentially stream in.
Yeah, definitely. Schedule is king sometimes in these fantasy playoffs. But also at the same time, we've been talking all episode about schedule. Don't forget that your superstars are superstars, right? You're not going to be dropping Patrick Kane because Chicago only plays 2 times in the semis. So hopefully people won't make any bad decisions rostering players who play more games over like superstars. But I think the listeners that are making it to their fantasy playoffs know that at this point. Thank you for joining us for this marathon episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, where we ran through every single team in the league, looking at their playoff schedules, dropping tidbits. I hope you liked it. Tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. Let us know what you think. We love to hear your feedback. We love to talk hockey. We want to give you some advice. If you have any advice questions, we're going to be happy to answer them. If you have like a lot of advice questions, if you really want to dig in deep, come hang out in our Patreon Discord. Come hang out in our patron-only Discord server, where all the fantasy heads are there, and we're all trying to help each other out, except for people playing against each other in the couple. I guess they don't want to help their opponents, but you know what I'm saying. We have a lot of fun. You could sign up now, hang out for a month, get through the playoffs, then you could always cancel if you don't want to hang out for the summer, though I do recommend that the patrons do hang out for the summer, because we're going to be, after April, lowering the price, or like the pledge amount that gets you all of our perks down to like any amount you want to give us, like $1 a month even, so you can hang out all summer. We're going to have a lot of fun in the Patreon over the summer. We're still going to be dropping episodes. We're going to get into beat writer interviews after the season. We're going to start doing the playoff pool. We're going to have our rankings of players for the drafts next year. So like, we're not going to stop. So if you are a patron, we hope you'll hang on. And if you're not a patron, come sign up now, and the price is about to go down, right? To get into our awesome community. So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. KeepingKarlsson.com/patron. We'll always take a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you'd be so kind. But with that, Brian, I'm going to stop my blabbering. Why don't I cue the outro music, and you can read us the credits?
All right, 400 episodes. It's only right that we went 400 hours today to help get you all ready for your fantasy playoffs. Thank you very much. Oh, that's not how I start the credits. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our super supporters, Tom, Derek, Andrea, David, Christopher, Rob, Flash, Patty, and Tyler. You're all the greatest. All our patrons are the greatest. You know who else is the greatest? Kevin Hebert, our cupful coordinator and our team of co-commissions. Thanks to you all for guiding us through an amazing cupful regular season. kkupfl.com if you want to check out more. Thanks to you, Elon, and Shams Benamor for the amazing stream of news on Twitter at Game Day Lines, at Game Day News NHL, and at Game Day Goalies, all available at GameDayTweets.com. You couldn't have made it easier to keep up on all the fantasy relevant news that comes through every day. Make sure to listen to Short Shifts midweek and follow Ben and Lewis at Short Shifts KK. And also listen and follow to Dave and his at NHL Stream Scheme. Link in the show notes. Logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Also, Brandon did the logos for our new suite of Game Day Tweets logos, so you should definitely check that out. Outro music by Pat Roach. And this episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, HockeyGoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and NBC Sports Edge, and Yahoo.
Great job! As always, Brian, I had such a blast over these past couple of hours talking about all these teams with you. Looking forward to, I believe I'll be joining Ben for one of the Short Shifts episodes this week. Lewis is still on vacation, and Ben's going to have another guest for the other episodes. We're going to have a lot of fun in our feed. Make sure you're subscribed. And Brian, I'll talk to you next Sunday, and hopefully we'll still be talking to a lot of people still alive in their fantasy playoffs.
I can't wait to tie. Let us know how everything's going at Keeping Karlsson too. And during your fantasy playoffs, whether you're in or out, make sure you're doing this one thing, which is helping us make sure that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Boom! Thank you so much to everyone joining for the live show. This is very late, so I think I'm going to have to not have a post-game show this time. But see you, Brian.
Post-game. See you, Elon. Bye, everyone in the chat. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Mwah. We love you. Love's a strong word, but
Elon's uncomfortable with love.
I'm uncomfortable with love for the people who, have really earned my love. I really appreciate the patrons, though. What am I saying?